So starting a new series here on the Minuteman Initiative, we're going to be calling it the Minuteman Layout, and this episode is going to be part 1 of that series where we're going to cover multi-purpose rifle platforms. I think that's a great place to start, kind of giving you the information necessary to set up your rifle if you haven't done so already, or if you have an array of rifles and they're kind of here and there and you're not really sure where you want to go with them. This might be a good podcast to kind of get you dialed in. Again, this is a series, so we're looking forward to future episodes where we're going to be breaking down gear and other considerations related to having that modern-day Minuteman mindset. So look out for these layout episodes. We're excited about them. I think they're going to add a lot of value, and I hope you enjoy this episode.
Dude, what was it that, I don't know what it was, but the military, man, it was just filled with creative people. Like, I remember one time when I was in, I got smoked over something really stupid, and it was like nothing. It was actually before we were doing EIB, which was messed up because it was literally the day before, or the morning of our PT test for EIB. And I got the crap smoked out of me because I was a brand new guy. Like, I had only been there for like a couple days, and I happened to roll right into EIB, which is random.
That sucks.
But this guy...
EIB is Expert Infantry Badge.
Yeah, I think he didn't want me to pass, so...
Yeah, there's gatekeepers. That's like a common thing. Like, when you go through... And for those that don't know, like, when you're in the military and you're infantry, it's like... there's like this I don't know how to explain it, but there's like this almost continuous, it's kind of like a fraternity in a way, and I think this is why you see some of this gatekeeping mentality outside of the military as well. Sorry, I'm taking this in a weird direction, but
no, that's good.
When you get in and you're a brand new guy, you come out of basic training, it's like not only do you have to show up to your unit and prove yourself, but you also know nothing yet. Like, and you really don't. I mean,
yeah, you don't.
You know basic stuff, but coming from the perspective of like, I just went through basic training and my advanced infantry training, like I'm ready to go. And your unit's like, nah, dude, you're a child. Like, and it's time for you to learn. And but there's this like gatekeeping thing that exists where if there's some kind of specialty, like competition where like the Expert Infantry Badge is like a series of tests. It's like how long is it? Like 4 or 5 days long. And
I think it's a week, isn't it?
Yeah, it might be a full week, but you have to do all of these tests and you have to like, a lot of them are pass fail. Like if you fail it, then you're just out.
You're done. Yeah.
You have to score, like a higher than normal PT score on your test. You got to do like a big ruck march, you got to do land nav, you got to do radio stuff and marksmanship.
Yeah, I think basically how it works is if you fail one event, you're out, but then you also pointed on each event, so you have to get like an overall score also in order to even make it to like the final, which is the 12-mile ruck march.
Yeah.
So if you do poorly and you're still passing all the events, you still won't make it.
Yeah.
Like if you're just barely passing, getting through.
Yeah. So I mean, it's hard. It's pretty hard to get. So there's like this unspoken, it's kind of messed up, but a lot of times there's this kind of unspoken effort to make it extra hard for brand new guys, because the thought process is like, if this brand new guy gets this EIB, then we're not going to be able to haze him really, because it's like a lot of the stuff they haze you on is stuff that is stuff that you should.
Yeah, especially since at the time my unit didn't have any EIB holders really. Like,
yeah.
Like there was hardly any. There was very few. So, and it was my squad leader that he smoked the crap out of me. Long story short, I failed the PT test because I literally got destroyed right before we walked onto the PT field. And
they just smoked you forever.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and then
you had to go do not only a PT test, but I think you have to score a 270.
Yeah.
Which is...
Like, I would have passed the PT test. Like, I never came close to failing the PT test, but I was just smoked as far as push-ups were concerned.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I was already just destroyed, and he made sure like to destroy the crap out of me, but just giving me ridiculous things like you got to run to this dumpster with this giant boulder for no reason, and every time I would fail doing that, then he'd make me do push-ups and all this stuff, which, I mean, looking back on it is funny, but, you know, you're just like, he made me like, I remember I was in the middle of doing push-ups, he grabbed an MRE and just like chucked it right in my face, like smoked me right in the face with it. It's just like,
No.
You got 5 minutes to eat it all. If you don't eat it all, then I'm going to smoke you till you puke it up. And like, I was just like, dude. And I'm at my unit at this point too. Like, I'm like, man, I thought this kind of behavior would end, but clearly not at all.
It's actually worse. It's worse. Like when I got to my unit, I mean, basic training's pretty tough.
But you know, there's a limit on it. And I think that's like the mental game. Like in basic training, it didn't hit me as hard because I knew, okay, I just got to get to this date. Like, I'm that type of person. Like, if I know that there's a finish line,
yeah,
then it's like I can mentally prepare myself just to like deal with whatever is thrown my way.
Yeah.
But if there's no like, you don't have a designated end date on like when you're going to be stopped treating like trash. Like, It's just like, I think that's like a mental thing for me. Like, man, this sucks.
Well, I used to do in basic, I would go from like meal to meal, because you figure out pretty quick, like, okay, they don't really skip meals very often.
Yeah.
In basic training, they have to feed you and keep you like healthy and stuff. And so it's like, yeah, there's times that you get meal deprived and sleep deprived, but not very much, not really in basic that much. So yeah, I would be like, okay, like we're going to do PT, but then afterwards we get breakfast. So like we do like stupid PT stuff, and then it's like, okay, it's chow time. So awesome. And then it's like, all right, at this time, you know, it's going to be lunchtime, you know, and I would just go from like meal to meal. But then when you get to your unit, there's no rules like that. So
no,
you can have some like team leader. Man. Yeah, you can have a team leader that's like, you're going to be smoked all day and you're not eating.
Dude, my team leader was intense too. Like when I first got there, he was a straight up idiot. That's like to be completely honest, like I didn't know it at the time. I was like, because you don't know any better. You're just like, man, this guy hates me, and I don't even know what I did, which was such a weird feeling because, you know, all the way through school, honestly, us in general, Barlow's in general, that's our last name if you didn't know that. But anyways, like we're all pretty likable people. So all the way through high school and all that stuff, like school, high school, I never really had like, I mean, I got in fights and stuff in school, like every once in a while, but it's pretty rare. Like,
yeah,
it's like I think I got in like maybe 2 or 3 fights, like all the way through, like from, you know, preschool all the way through my senior year. So like it wasn't very much. And so, I think 2 of those fights were in elementary school in North Carolina. So it's like, it's like it doesn't really count. Yeah. It's just like this kid gave me a wedgie, so now I'm gonna punch him in the face. But yeah, so I mean, I got along with people pretty well, so I never really had anyone, like I never experienced people like legitimately hate me, and this dude like actually like legitimately hated me, and I was like, man, this is weird. Like, and he's a grown man, which is even more weird. Like, this dude's got like a 5 o'clock shadow by like I'm a kid, you know, and I'm like, this guy would like, I remember we'd clear rooms and he would miscommunicate something, and it was always him. Like, I mean, like after I switched to a different squad leader, I realized how much of an idiot he was, because it was like, man, that dude is, I mean, he even got called out like after I switched to a different squad because I started like taking off. Like, they're like, look at Barlow, like he's like one of the best soldiers we got in the unit right now, and he everyone thought he was trash when he worked for you. So what does that say about you, basically?
Yeah.
Like, which is true. I mean, like if you don't have good leadership, you can't grow, because that's who can build you and whatnot. I mean, I think it was still good for me to go through those experiences because it like made me more.
It's character building.
Yeah, it was character building, and it also showed me like what not to be as a leader as well. Like I was like, no, I'm not going to be anything like this guy.
And teaching you to like cope with adversity, which that's why, you know, when they started to get rid of hazing and stuff, it's kind of weird. I saw it from both sides. I remember going through it, and I was like, whenever I'm in a team leader position or whenever I get into leadership, I'm never going to do this. Like, I remember thinking that. And then
you get into it and you realize.
You get into it and you deploy, and then you come back and you've got these wide-eyed, naive new guys who don't know the gravity of it. And so you have to find a balance. I think there are guys that have legitimate mental issues, you know, or they have like they have that power syndrome where they're like, you know, I was bullied in high school and now I have a position of power, so I'm going to like take out my, there's a lot of that, you know, you got guys that are like, I'm going to take out my anger on these random guys that can't do anything about it. That stuff's just childish and stupid. But you do have to kind of find a balance, and I think a good leader does. Like, you find a way to be like, yeah, you know, you're getting, like, you have to be, there's consequences for this, because that's what it's supposed to be about, is like, you do something and then you get consequences, and it teaches you that, like,
yeah, like I remember I got someone put underneath me who was kind of just like he was really, oh man, he just was not a good soldier is what it came down to, but he should never join the military, but that's fine. I mean, I don't know. I want to say he was trying, but I don't know if he was actually. Like, now that I look back on it, I don't really know what happened with the kid because I got out shortly after, but he just would not learn anything. He'd always forget gear and always, like, he was all messed up. And
yeah,
I remember I had to smoke him one time, and I just told him, like, dude, I don't enjoy doing this to, like I'm not, this isn't like something that I'm gaining pleasure from by smoking you, like, but you got to learn. So, like, this is what we got to do, like, until you can figure it out. Like, because ultimately I'm not gonna constantly, because it looks bad on me, you know, in a leadership position. If you're like tasked with, okay, this is your group of guys, you need to make sure they're not squared away. If they're always jacked up, it doesn't look good on you. So, like, yeah, there's that side too. Like, at least in the military setting, you know, there's accountability,
you're
all
held
the way
accountable.
Up. Yep.
Like the team leader, you know, as a team leader, you're responsible for 3, usually, sometimes 4 others. And yeah, if one of them is messed up, they don't have what they're supposed to have, that's on you ultimately. So yeah. And but yeah, as far as, like, I don't know, that could be a whole other topic. It's actually a really good conversation to have, because you know, you hear a lot about, like, guys that are kind of gatekeep or whatever. Like, you hear that phrase a lot, like, from civilians, guys with no military background that are trying to learn this stuff, and they're like, man, you know, military guys gatekeep, which I don't agree with. I think it's stupid, and I think a lot of it stems from kind of people being prideful and, like, arrogant.
Yeah, and they're indoctrinated into it as well. Like, that's, like, how it is in the military.
Yeah,
like,
but that's what I was leading up to.
Especially from infantry guys, because even, like non-infantrymen, like pogues, you know, person other than grunts, you know, we treat them like, no, you guys ain't infantry, you know, and that's like a thing in the military, which people in the civilian world don't understand that, because they're like, well, aren't infantry just idiots? It's like, well, in the military, like, everyone works for the infantry. Like, in the army, everyone works for the infantry.
Yeah.
So the infantry is actually, like, kind of the bee's knees. Like, they're the, you know,
they are the forefront of what the whole logistical machine is built for.
Yeah.
Like, it is built, the army, especially specifically the army, is built to support infantry units. And a lot of people get that confused, you know.
Yeah, because they're the queen of the battlefield, so that's, like, referring to chess. So, like, ultimately, you protect your queen, you serve your queen, because your queen's the most, like most aggressive piece on the board. Like,
yeah,
you don't let the queen die, because it's, like, the one that can take everything out.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of people get it confused. They think that, you know, they hear, like, tip of the spear, like, referring to SOCOM and stuff like that. But SOCOM is a very specialty tool. It's like, yeah, they're usually used for very, like, specific mission sets, but when it comes to, like, full-on warfare, it's infantry. Like, infantry is the, you know, even SOCOM's used to support infantry efforts.
Yep.
They're clearing, you know, like, specialty objectives, or they're doing, like, FLS clearances or whatever, you know.
Or just doing, you know, a lot of like, at least during our time in, like, they were used for training.
Yeah.
You know,
like
Afghani police and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Which is cool. I mean, someone's got to do that, which we were even doing that too.
Yeah.
To a certain extent. Like, I know my unit's deployment that I didn't go on, right after I got out. That's all they did. They went over to Iraq and they just worked with the Iraqi police. So
Yeah.
like they were just over there to train them up. But
yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of that gatekeeping culture comes right out of the military. And
what I was getting at was, like, I didn't really get to finish that where I was going with that, but I was just talking about like, so not even like even within the military, like infantry guys are ingrained to be like, no, you're not us, you're nothing like us, you're nothing like us, you're nothing like us, and that's like forced into our heads, all the way through to the point where it's like, no, I'm not teaching that guy anything. He's not infantry. Why would he do it?
Yeah,
unless you're a medic. That's like the one, like medics and our fisters. They were like the two guys that like we took care of, like guys who called in artillery and our guys who patched us up. Like those were the guys that we kind of took care of. But other than that, it's kind of like
observers and medics.
Yeah.
So it's a culture that exists, and it doesn't just exist. It's a culture that's like fed into while you're in, and so it's like kind of brainwashing, indoctrination, whatever you want to call it. It very much is those things, but then you get out, and then you've got these guys that, from your perspective as someone that's been in, hasn't experienced any, like, and this is not, we are, neither Steven or I are saying that this is right. I don't think it is at all, but obviously we don't, because our company like it teaches stuff that we've learned, but yeah, I think a lot of people get hung up on stuff or get hung up on that culture, and they're like, especially for people that haven't like kind of gone through the suck, is like what a lot of people would say. Like, man, you have no idea like this stuff, or people that don't understand the gravity, which I can see that too. So I can see that side of it. Like if you've lost a bunch of buddies and you've seen how bad like warfare can be, and then you've just got these like random guys that are like, I'm gonna fight the, like I'm gonna be ready to go, which is good. It's good to have good people with that mentality, but kind of being the old crusty, like, sometimes that old crusty like guy that looks at it from that lens of like been there, done that. Yeah, it's like you don't know, but I don't think the answer. I mean, you still don't know. I mean, I stand by that. Like, if you are a person that's like trying to learn all that, try to come from a position of humility and know that like, man, I really don't know, but I want to learn as much as I can. And again, on the same side of that, if you are someone from the military, instead of looking at it as like, you don't know, so therefore you should never learn it because you haven't earned it or whatever it is. It's like, no, like maybe do your best to give them the tools they need to be successful, just like was done to you before as a new guy. Like when we were new, that same culture existed. Like, yeah, you go through basic or whatever, but basic's basically just like a big mental conditioning game. It's just teaching you how to trust leadership and follow orders, think critically, work with others.
Yeah, it's basically just getting you like institutionalized in a way.
Yeah. So, and it's teaching you like it's teaching you the ways of the military. But yeah, when you get to your unit, you are, just like you would want to make sure those new guys are successful and are going to be an asset to you because you're going to probably deploy with them. You want to do the same thing with people around you outside of the military, even if you have a military background and someone you're working with doesn't. It's like, who are you most likely to throw down with if you have to throw down? Is it going to be your ex-platoon members that are spread all over the nation, or is it going to be like these 5 dudes that are wanting to learn and also being willing to learn from them, because there's stuff that they might know that you didn't learn, and it might be awesome stuff, and it often is. Like, you can learn a lot from each other, and different backgrounds are valuable. So, yeah. But that kind of, I kind of went a weird direction with that, but it just made me think when you were talking about it. But to answer your original question, or to kind of like talk about, just to kind of wrap this up, I guess, one of the funniest things I ever saw, it wasn't actually me getting smoked, but just talking about smoke sessions and being creative. It was my squad leader that did it, and it was a different team. So it was the other team. It wasn't my team. It was the other team, and it was team leader and everything. It was hilarious. But so we were my platoon was heavy weapons, so we did a lot with trucks. Like we would mount up on trucks, and heavy weapons companies are anti-tank, anti-armor. So that's like in a standard infantry role, that's like your main mission is like taking out tanks and stuff. So we had javelins and tow missiles and, big old machine guns and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's mostly mounted because those are not, those are either like stationary position weapons, not the javelin. The javelin's pretty mobile, but like the tow missile is very stationary. You're not running around with that. But we did a lot with trucks. So part of doing a lot with trucks is understanding trucks and being good at driving them and operating them, and that's just like you just have to be good at that. And we prided ourselves on that because no, we weren't like whatever the driver MOS is. Sorry, I don't know what it is. But it's like a 90 series or something, but 91 mic or something, I don't know. But
Deltas?
Delta what? 91 Delta?
I thought they were like 19 Deltas or something like that. Or
No,
that's not right.
That's 19. That's like aviation or something. Anyways, it doesn't matter. I'm pretty sure they're up there in the old MOS numbers. But
yeah.
Anyways, so there's a lot of training you do on vehicle operation and vehicle driving and a pivotal part of like operating military vehicles. Well, one big thing you got to know.
88 Mike.
88 Mike. Okay, yeah. Was a driver.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So anyways, we were not 88 Mikes. We were 11 Bravos that were also, that spent a lot of time at being good at operating vehicles. So part of that, or kind of a fundamental part of that is, navigating in and out of like motor pools. And then also when you get out to like a training area, like keeping everything nice and organized. And you always back military vehicles in, like, you never pull them in with the nose facing whatever bank you're parking against or parking lot. You back them in so you can like leave really fast, So there's a lot of that going on. Well, military vehicles you can't see out the back on them. There's no back windows,
Yeah.
like they're all armored or whatever, especially like your big trucks, like your MRAPs and stuff. Like you've got mirrors, sure, but they don't really do much for you. So you use what's called a ground guide, which is a guy that stands in front of the vehicle and actually sees where you're going and like gives you hand and arm signals to tell you where to turn and like where to go. So we did a ton of that stuff, and there's no reason to not be good at it. But some guys just got confused, like they're, I don't know, tired or like just never, some guys were just never really that good at it. Like someone would be ground guiding and they'd like do the wrong thing in driving. Well, my squad leader had gotten after these guys multiple times because they kept like screwing up and like jackknifing trailers and just doing dumb stuff. And then they'd have to come get me or like one of the other guys that was good on a trailer and be like, just come over. Can you come over and just do this? And well, he started to get pissed. He's like, no, they're doing other stuff like, Barlow or, and all they're busy. Their trucks are parked. Like what's going on? Like it was kind of that whole thing. Well, they just kept messing up. And so I come out to go to my truck and I'm like, what am I looking at? And I just see my squad leader like standing there, like saying stuff. And I just see guys like squatted down in like the, like that duck walk position.
Yeah.
Just ground guiding each other. Like, so there's a guy and he's like telling them what direction to go. So there's a guy like squat walking, like duck walking, like ground, like giving the hand and arm signals. And then there's another guy like backing up, like pretending to drive. Like, yeah, dude, like backing up. And he's like, okay, turn to the right, so he's like telling them where to go. He's like, ground guide him. And I was like cracking up. And so I went and got some other guys. I was like, look, and they're like, "Whoa, what's going on?" I was like, they've been screwing up the ground guiding like all day. And so he's got him learning, he's teaching him ground guiding. But it went on for like 2 hours. They were just like hours of them just, you could see it in their faces. They're all red and they're kind of like shaking and they're in the squat position like, oh,
Yeah.
The funniest thing about it though is they never struggled with ground guiding again, dude. Like something about
after that?
yeah, because something about going through that struggle and adversity and like being smoked like that, it just made them not focus so much on like the hand and arm signals and like overthinking it. They had to focus on like the struggle, and so it just like locked it in on like what it was.
I think that's why like that stuff should never go out. Like I mean, I know it is getting pulled out of the military, but it shouldn't ever go out of the military because I think that stuff works. What I was getting at the beginning was my squad leader was just an idiot. Like,
yeah,
I was getting smoked for no reason.
Oh yeah.
Which I mean, I'm okay with that if he admits that basically I'm just trying to make you hard.
Yeah,
which is fine. But the fact of the matter was, he like even after like I got some time in the military, he always kind of wanted me back. Like, so I think he got demoted down to like a team leader because he kind of sucked, honestly.
Oh yeah, that guy's trash then.
And then he wanted me back in his team, and I'm like, dude, I don't ever want to come work for you again. Like,
yeah,
I'm past that. And yeah, he was weird. I think he just liked me a lot, and maybe that's like I don't know what it was. It was strange to me, but
no, this guy was really good. Like, he was a good leader, and that's what was funny. He wasn't yelling at him. He was just like, all right. He said, yep, do this, do that. And then in the middle of it all going on, the first sergeant came over because this was at a shoot house. We were at a shoot house training.
Okay.
So like vehicle stuff was like, that's where we had all of our kit and stuff was in our vehicles, And so like, how shoot houses are, there's only so many, you have to go through in like waves. Yeah. So it was like it was after they'd already gone through or whatever. So they were just chilling.
They had nothing but time.
And but the first sergeant, he's there like cruising around, like making sure his guys are doing good. He came out, he's like, hey, what's going on here? And he, without missing a beat, my squad leader's like, oh, just a little corrective training, first sergeant. And he was just like, he just watched for a little bit and he's like, I love it. And he just like left. He just like marched off.
Dude, first sergeants are crazy, dude.
But he was kind of like, I could tell he was like, all right, is this just a giant waste of time? And then once he figured out what was going on, he was like, that's just, I love it. And he just marched off. And
dude,
like, man,
one time my entire company got smoked by my first sergeant.
Oh, I always loved when that happened.
Yeah, because you watch the platoon sergeants just like,
dude, my company got smoked by the sergeant major, dude. There was a guy really quick. I know we're just rambling forever, but I got to tell this really quick. Actually, we might have this guy on one of these days, but we're planning on having him on the podcast, but I'll keep his name concealed for now. But anyways, he got pissed. So it was like, and I can't exactly remember what was going on, but he basically called out someone, and I'll have to maybe ask him about it if we ever have him on, but he called someone out, and he was not a leader. He was an E4 at the time, I believe, probably E4 promotable. He had been in for a while. And he called out a staff sergeant, and he was like, no, you messed up. Basically, the staff sergeant was kind of threw somebody under the bus and kind of tried to like push the blame. And I mean, I've heard from a lot of people in this issue that it was very much kind of on the staff sergeant. Something that happens is when you spend a lot of time together in a unit, especially after you come back from a deployment, you're all really close, and it kind of you leave, you start to deviate slightly from that like rank structure and go to more of like almost like a first name basis, where it's like, it's not actually a first name basis because last names are basically your first name when you're in the military, but
yeah,
it's like, each other really well. So even if you've got like someone that outranks you, there's times where it's like, dude, like there was times I would go up to people and be like, are you good? Like, what's going on, man? Like you can start to have those kind of conversations, and you don't have to deploy, even if you've just worked with people for a long time and you've gone through like a lot of crap together. It comes to a point where you can go up and kind of have like human conversations. It's not just like, Staff Sergeant, are you okay? Like it's like,
yeah, I stopped addressing people as sergeant. Like,
Yeah, it's just like, hey man, like what's going on?
But that's because I think you got to earn that though too.
You
sometimes you
do.
earn it by being deployed, and sometimes you just earn it by being squared away and rarely like jacked up. So people are like, yeah, I'm not gonna make this guy like snap to ease for me.
Ironically, part of that earning process is like going through hazing and coming out on the other side, like a champ. But
yeah,
but yeah, no, agree. It's a long process. Like it doesn't happen. It's not like, all right, he's been here for a few months. It's like years, years of working together.
If you do that in a few months, dude, you're gonna get destroyed.
You'd get smashed by the entire platoon. Like you'd have like lower level guys like freaking out on you. But I've seen some of that too. But anyways, so it was kind of a situation where it was like kind of like person to person. It was kind of like, nah, like that's not, you're not doing this. And he was kind of calling the guy out. He's like, with all due respect, like you're an idiot kind of thing was going on. And it was loud. So this was down, this was getting ready for a formation. So we're up in the barracks, like windows are open. It's hot, summertime. And we just start hearing like, out in the parking lot. And we're like, what in the world? So like literally our whole company's like looking out the window. Like you have all these, the people, there's a bunch of people down there. There's a whole platoon down there. They're down there early. They had some kind of layout thing going on, if I remember right. But we're all watching and we're all getting ready to go down there. And this individual that started kind of saying, no, you're jacked up, with all due respect, is a big dude. He's a big, strong dude that knows how to fight. And so there's a level of like that too, where this guy knows like he kind of starts to be like, you're messed up and you are. And this rank's about to not matter anymore. Like it's kind of like getting to that level where it's like, and this other guy knows that he'd get balled up fast by this guy, like regardless of rank, or what, he'd get smashed by this guy like easily. And I mean, this guy not only would destroy him, but if anybody kind of tried to help, it'd be tough for anybody involved, So
yeah.
So they're kind of like, this whole thing's going on and you can kind of see this dynamic, and he tries to like kind of pull rank a little bit. And he's like, it's kind of like, he's basically like, it's too late for that. Like you need to like, well, unbeknownst to all of us, the sergeant major of our battalion is around the corner kind of listening in on all this. And he just marches around the corner like out of nowhere. And he goes, what's going on here? And they, at ease, they all yell at ease. And he just comes in hot. And so the highest ranking guy out there, which was the staff sergeant, was like, Sergeant Major, he's like, start pushing. And we're like, oh. And he said, and he looked over at everyone else. He's like, if your section leader's pushing, you're pushing. And they're like, okay, so everyone gets down and they're all pushing. And he's like, where's your first sergeant? And we were like, what? And all of a sudden, like, and he goes inside the building. We're all upstairs. We're like, like hiding, because we're all lower enlisted, like, oh man, shh, because you don't want to get caught like looking. And he was looking up at the building. And then we start hearing him yelling. He's like, get your first sergeant. If you're one of the people looking down here, you should be out here too. If you're a lower rank than any of the people out here, you're out here pushing. And so people start kind of filtering out. Some people are hiding. Some people are filtering out and just randomly getting in the front leaning rest,
Just up in their rooms, just in the front leaning rest.
No, people are like going outside. But people are hiding. And then we start hearing people yelling like, formation right now. Like people are like running up and down the building.
Dude, and that's another thing. Like first sergeants and platoon sergeants, they're pulling you into that regardless.
Oh, you're getting pulled
because they're mad that they're getting smoked.
Yeah. So
everyone's going down with me.
We go out there and he's got everybody pushing, and we're like, dude, what's going on? And the funniest thing, I remember being like, kind of like,
you would have been respect
new
then, at the time.
No, I wasn't very new.
Oh, I thought when you served with him, you were like,
yeah, no, I was newer, but I was I was in that weird period where like,
you were like,
I'm like an experienced.
E3?
No, I was an E4 at the time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I promoted pretty early, but I like made it through the like awkward new guy stage into like, he's actually scored away. Let's get him going. And then other new guys came. So then I was like the non-deployed squared away guy for
Yeah.
a while, but which is a weird place to be because, I don't know. I was in that phase. I was in like everyone knew who I was and stuff, and like they're like, oh yeah, he's legit. He's a squared away dude. And then you had new guys, so that's kind of the range. But I hadn't deployed yet. But anyways, so we're all out there like pushing and stuff, and our captain was pushing, which I remember being like, why? Like for the sergeant major.
He was probably just doing it out of workout.
Just doing it out of respect, which was cool.
Captains are kind of crazy like that.
Yeah.
Some of them.
But anyways, he basically made those guys were out there pushing for a while because everyone had to get outside. But as soon as everyone was out there pushing, he was like, all right, get up. And he's like, all right, go ahead. And, and then it got like kind of not like leadership mode. He went into like kind of wholesome sergeant major mode. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
All right, man, go ahead and form up, guys. Go ahead and get in your formations. And we're like kind of ragtag, like trying to like get in formation. And then, squad leaders are looking around all pissed, like, where's so-and-so? Because some people weren't out there.
Probably not registered.
Yeah. No, he was out there.
Oh, was he?
Yeah. We were in the same room watching, dude.
He's like, I got to use the bathroom. I'm going to use the restroom real quick.
We were laughing. Like, we're all out there pushing, laughing because it was it was hilarious.
I was about to say, everyone that's lower enlisted can deal with a smoke session because it was probably pretty weak compared to some of the smoke sessions.
Oh, yeah. No, it was a lot of just like in the front leaning rest.
Like, I remember
just
that
like
when
giggling.
When I first started smoking my whole company, it was weak sauce compared to like what I'd already gone through.
Because it's just to prove a point. It's like,
but they were mad. Like I remember my platoon sergeant was pissed that he was getting smoked.
Because when you get to that high of a rank, you don't get smoked anymore. Like you're treated in a more professional manner. But sometimes I've seen it done a few times like that where it's like almost a point. It's like proving a point. It's like, listen, there's still a rank structure, and ultimately, like you can still make mistakes too. And I think his point was like, listen, if you've got guys, because he did like a big talk for a long time. Sergeant Major Johnson, I remember his name now, but yeah, just the Johnson dude. He was actually kind of a hardcore dude, but he was like, listen, like if you've got guys that upset, he's like, I overheard a lot of that. He's like, if guys are that upset, then, there's a problem. And like he was right. He was like, I don't know what the situation is, but you need to get it squared away man to man. He's like, he's like, rank's not getting pulled when, like he kind of had the lower enlisted's back, a little bit. But it ended up being a big thing and counseling statements and crap and, threatened Article 15s and all this dumb stuff because, of course, once Sergeant Major's gone, leadership's like, we're embarrassed, and they have to be all ego. But yeah, I don't remember exactly what happened, but I just remember being out there like pushing, like, this is hilarious. Like, you're kind of like giggling and stuff. And
I'm trying to think if that ever happened. I don't think so. My Sergeant Major was randomly Sergeant Major Caldwell from Restrepo, aka First Sergeant Caldwell in Restrepo, but he made it to Sergeant Major and then became mine, which is random.
Oh man. Well, anyways, dang.
Military's small in that regard.
Yeah.
But
so,
anyways, we'll get into what we're actually talking about.
Yeah.
Which is nothing to do with what we just talked about.
No, not at all. But sometimes you just got to go down memory lane.
It's good though. I think that stuff is good for, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about in our last podcast, like getting out in the suck and experiencing that as a group, like builds camaraderie and also builds like harder people, harder men. So and you don't want to have a bunch of softies that you're doing this stuff with, because if we actually end up having to do this stuff for real, it's not going to be easy. So
no, not at all. It's going to be harder than anything anyone's ever had to do, like even prior service guys.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it would be very different to have to do this stuff at home.
Very much so.
Like,
and that's not even like that's not even, we're talking natural disasters even. Like,
yeah.
I remember I talked to one of my drill sergeants was in the 82nd. He was he must have been GRF at the time, but he had to go to he had to deploy to Hurricane Katrina, and he said that was what he saw during that was worse than anything he ever saw overseas. And he deployed multiple times to Iraq and Afghanistan. So he said that something about it being, your own civilians that you're dealing with, pulling bodies out and stuff. He said that was way tougher. And I would imagine it would be because it hits closer to home,
Yeah.
Way closer. Because
you realize, you realize like, oh, this could have been my family, like so easily. And even if you put yourself in the shoes of the people in other countries, when you're in other countries, it's like,
like a real moment.
You're kind of the big bad guy kicking doors and going into random houses in the middle of the night, and kids are screaming and running around and scared,
Yeah.
And it's like, dang, you can't think about it while you're over there because you got a job to do. But at the same time, I've thought about it a lot since I've been back, and I'm like, man, how many guys are going to look at it like I looked at it, like I got a job to do, and they're just going to smash around, and I hope and pray that never happens here.
Well, and that's how they're going to be looking at it, regardless if it's foreign or domestic military that we're dealing with. It's 100% going to be someone just doing their job.
Yeah.
And they don't care about you.
No.
They may think about it like what you're saying after the fact, but it's not going to be in the moment. It's not going to be thought about at all. It's just going to be, I'm doing my job.
Yeah, I can tell you right now, like, you do not care about them. I mean, on a humanity level, I think you do, because you got to have, otherwise you just turn into a monster, and not in a good way. But what I'm saying is you care about your buddies to your left and your right. Like, you care about getting the mission done, and not even, at least from the way I was, it wasn't even about like, oh, we got to go do this mission because that's what we were told to do. Like, I mean, you go because you are told to go and do whatever that is. But
you do everything
you do
about it, following that like point on just to protect everyone.
Yeah, like we're all getting back. We're all getting back. Like it's not going to be. There's not going to be any weirdo in here. I don't care if it's a, like a kid that picks up a gun or what. Like, I'm making sure my brothers to my left and my right get back, and it sounds kind of crazy. And thankfully, from my experience, no kids ever picked a gun up or anything like that. Thank God for that. But people have had to deal with that kind of stuff. So,
yeah.
And that's war, and war is absolutely hell. So we don't want to hear, and even like Steven said, even if it's a natural disaster or like economic collapse, like that stuff will emerge, like that kind of chaos.
Yeah, and at the current rate we're going, like there is going to be economic collapse, I think, here soon. Like I don't think that's like completely out of the realm. Like I think
it's the most realistic scenario.
Yeah,
especially for us here, where supply chain is so valuable. Like we're pretty isolated in Alaska. There's a lot of natural resources here, but you got to know what you're doing to be able to take advantage of it, because this environment is always trying to kill you. Like even in the summertime, it's amazing how weird the weather can flip on you. And in the winter, like if you don't have a way to stay warm, you're not making it. You won't make it through the winter.
Nope.
And staying warm means working hard. Like you got to cut down wood. Or cut down. I guess you got to cut down trees and make chop up wood, and you got to constantly be like looking for food, and hopefully you've got a lot stored, and the list goes on, and that'll be future podcasts. But kind of in this vein, we're slowly digging our way out of old memory lane into real conversation, and on to our topic for today, which is talking about multi-purpose rifles. Now, this is going to be kind of a repeated series, not the multi-purpose rifle, but we're going to call it the Minuteman layout. So this will come up, anytime you see a new episode that says Minuteman layout, it's going to be gear related, and specifically gear related to that kind of Minuteman focus. Again, just a quick synopsis on that, or a quick summary. Obviously, it's kind of the theme of our podcast. The whole idea is responsible citizens that are ready at a moment's notice, and within a minute's notice, it's kind of an analogy in a way, but also it has historical relevance because you had the Minutemen of the back in the Revolutionary age,
all the way till 1909, I think.
Yeah, that were literally, they prided themselves on having the discipline, gear, equipment, and skills necessary to deploy within a minute's notice. Within 60 seconds.
It's actually before revolutionary.
Yeah,
basically since the founding of our country till 1909. I think.
But they became, I guess they went in, they were utilized, I guess, in the Revolutionary War. Yeah. But anyways, so continuing that on, kind of a modern day Minuteman perspective of like, we still need to have those people within this country that have, put in the time, the money, and the resources and discipline to have the equipment necessary and the skills and the coordination necessary to deploy, in a moment's notice.
Yep.
So there's some gear and stuff you got to invest in. So we're going to do a layout series. So this is going to be part 1. But figured we'd start with the rifle. So multi-purpose rifle, what does that mean? Well, it's exactly what it sounds like. Some people have said, we've heard general purpose rifle, like GPR, get thrown around a lot. General purpose is, I don't like it as much, and here's why. What does that actually mean? And what's funny is I've seen some like diagrams and stuff of general purpose rifles, and they're so vast throughout the whole thing. Whereas a multi-purpose rifle is a kind of a specific build that can do multiple roles. So it's not really like general use, because use cases are so specific and they vary so much. It is a rifle that, it's kind of a jack of all, master of none in a way.
Yeah.
But you can actually kind of tailor it to your environment, which you absolutely should, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But multi-purpose, so you can do multiple missions with it, and it's outfitted to kind of serve you in all of those use cases. And it could be, depending on where you live, it might lean heavily into like kind of a recce build, like more reconnaissance style. It might be a little more CQB focused if you live in the city, but giving yourself the tools necessary on board. So it's kind of like your one-shop stop of a rifle where you can grab this thing up, it's your duty purpose, kind of like the modern day musket, like you had your musket all set up for how you needed it, tailored to you. You had your stuff set up the way you needed it back in the day. It's the same thing now. You've got the tools necessary. You've got the optic. You've got an optic that gives you good capabilities. It also gives you, long range capabilities, positive identification capabilities. The list goes on, and these are things we're going to get into.
Yeah, it's a do it all, man. And then honestly, because it's that, I think it's like, I always try to tell people, like, when you're buying gear, finish like if you're going to build a rifle, finish that rifle, like complete that rifle before you start building another rifle.
Such good advice.
And honestly, like, if you're just getting into this, which most of our listeners probably have AR-15 platforms and things like that, but if you're just getting into this, I think this is a great rifle to start with if you're going to build one.
For sure.
Because you're going to get so much out of it, and you're not going to need 3 other rifles, because this rifle does all 3 of those tasks decently. Like,
yeah.
It may not be the best at it, but it's definitely going to do a good job at it.
And even if you are someone that has a lot of platforms, take a hard look at those. And I've been very guilty of this, so this is not a pointing fingers thing here. I have been very guilty of like kind of majority setting up a gun, and then like, I want to build a truck gun or whatever, and you start kind of building that, and then I want to build like a home defense, like Mark 18 style, like CQB gun.
Yeah, it's cool.
And like, yeah, it's fun. It's fun to make new guns, but we're not doing this stuff for fun. I mean, a lot of people are like, what? I want to have fun. Yeah, having fun should be a byproduct. I think it's time to switch that mentality and change the culture from like, I'm into this stuff because it's like a hobby. I have a lot of fun with it. That's awesome. Like the fact that you can have fun with it is really good, and you should try to have fun with it. But really look at it and be like, okay, like real, like full focus here. Why am I actually buying all this stuff? This stuff's expensive, and it's an investment. And am I buying it for like, because that's what I see everybody doing, and I want like
the clout,
I want to have the clout. I want to be like everybody else. Am I getting it because it's like anything, it's just a materialistic thing where I just want it? Or am I actually getting this because I genuinely think I might have to use it? And I think a lot of people are getting into that mindset where they're like, man, I might have to legitimately use this stuff.
Yeah. I think you look at the current time like that we're living in, and it's like, man, the writing's on the wall. Like, and I think that's why there's been such a big shift in the community in general. And then also just like people who are starting, like there's such a rise in people getting into the community as well, because they're like, holy smokes, like it's kind of scary times we live in right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So, if you're starting to really think this way, and you're someone that is just now getting into this, and you're like, man, I need to build an AR and I don't know where to start. I had a guy in the shop the other day that was like, hey, I'm about to buy my first AR. What do I need to get? And we started to kind of have this conversation. And then there's people that are like, yeah, I've got like 10 AR builds, and 2 of them have good optics on them and all the rest of them don't. And, I still got to like set them up, and kind of like almost this conversation of like, man, yeah, I'm kind of still like, I need to get them set up. I need to set them all up. And, I've been like, or just sell them, man. Like sell off most of those rifles. The biggest thing you got to think about is you can only use one rifle at a time. Now, I'm not going to be the guy that's going to sit up here and be like, you only ever need one rifle. But kind of going back to what you said, Steven, until you get one rifle fully set up the way you think it's going to best serve you, there's not really a lot of sense in like going and spending money on other rifles.
Yeah, you got to look at for one, financially, like, can you afford to build a bunch of rifles and actually complete them? Can you build all the accessories that goes along with it, which we'll obviously go into, and more in the more series we do, we're going to go into some of the other stuff that we feel that you need, or at least work toward getting, and 2, like, is it actually feasible? Like for me, my oldest kid is 3 years old, and then I got 2 kids. One's 3, and then one's 1. Those kids aren't going to be picking up rifles and toting them around. And then my wife, she's going to have to, like, if something actually happens, like, she's going to be busy with the kids. Like, I'm not just going to ditch the kids and be like, here's a rifle, babe. Like, let's go into this gunfight. Like, that's just not how it's going to work.
That's not realistic at all.
So for me personally, I need one good rifle to at least sustain in my current area. Like we always talk about, like, you protect your family first, and then once you're situated, then you move, then you start getting with the community that you've built. Hopefully you've built it by then,
Yeah.
Because ultimately it's not going to like hit you in like the best moment. Like it's not going to, like, me and you and like all the guys we train with just happen to be all together whenever like stuff starts going downhill, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But
yeah,
I mean, you don't know, maybe it will, but, and it could be time too. There could be plenty of time to like, oh yeah, we got some time to actually work with, which that would be ideal, but you never know.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, that's kind of the whole motivation to spend time on that one rifle. It's like, we don't know how much time we have. Like, when do you actually need that? It's better to get it fully set up the way you think you need it now than to wait and just kind of like rinky dink around with other platforms and like, oh, check this out, I got this barrel over here on this, and it's like it's a waste of time and money, in my opinion, until you've got all that stuff. So that's where your
checklist is complete. You've
exactly
gotten everything that you need in order to be an asset, I guess.
Yeah.
And not a liability.
Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of the purpose. Multi-purpose rifle. So we're going to kind of break it down and talk about what that is. So we've got some things we're going to go through. I kind of want to talk about the gun itself first, like a good platform to start on. So a lot of people, we get asked a lot like barrel lengths and stuff like that. So right out the gate, I'm going to give you kind of a kind of a vague response. Met TC. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, it really depends on your environment. If you live in the middle of Detroit or you live in San Diego or something like that, going with a shorter platform may be smarter to do. Going with something, I would advise you to stay for 12.5 to be probably your shortest. I would go.
Yeah, if you're running 5.56, I mean, if you're doing 300 blackout or something like that, which I suggest 5.56 all day long because, for one, it's going to be more readily available than
absolutely
300 blackout. That alone makes it worth it, I think, over 300 blackout. But
I'm actually go ahead.
Also, as long as you're staying above that 12.5, you're going to be able to do a whole lot more with that rifle over 300 blackout. Honestly, especially if you go 14.5 and larger.
Yeah.
You're going to do, ballistically, you're going to be able to reach out farther.
Yeah.
And regardless if you're in an urban area, it's you still don't want to neuter your gun so far down. You want it to still be capable of doing what it's intended to do, which it should be able to hit 300, 500 yards. You should be able to still shoot those targets,
Yep.
I don't care where you're from. I still think that you should be able to do that because it's not okay, I'm in the city, so I'm going to stay in the city. You may eventually have to leave the city. So, yes, that's your current environment, but maybe you leave that environment and you don't want your rifle. That's the point of the multi-purpose. It should be able to do everything, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you dialed in on a really important topic, and that is caliber, and maybe that's the best place to start. There's a lot of differing opinions on what caliber. You've got your sects of people that are sects, SECTS
sections.
You've got your sexual people that these people are pretty sexual actually, but you've got your sexual people that want to run that 7.62 by 51 because it's a big boy, and that's awesome. And you've got dudes out there rocking and rolling with HK 91s, battle rifle style, dude. It's I mean,
because they're just those heavy hitters.
Yeah, it's just sexy, dude. I mean, more power to you, and that's awesome. And I'm not going to sit here and say 5.56. Now, I will say that we run 5.56. Us, Steven and I, and then our guys run 5.56. Here's what I am going to say. Whatever you choose to do, I think it's extremely important to keep uniformity across your platforms because ammo is now interchangeable, and more specifically, magazines should be interchangeable.
Yeah.
Now, we can get into special purpose rifles and stuff in the future where they might be chambered in a different caliber. And if you have the logistical support to maintain that and manage that or use it for very specific use cases, then that's a whole other conversation for a different time.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was about to say we actually suggest that you do that if you can pull it off.
Yeah.
But if you're a very small, either you're by yourself or you have a very small group of people and you can't logistically pull that off, then having a 5.56 platform or at least all the same platform, then I feel like you're benefiting from that more than if you had a bunch of different rifles.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And so caliber, similarity, or uniformity, and then magazine interchangeability is super important. It's going to make your logistical effort a lot easier. Something that I think people are misunderstanding. There's some people out there kind of preaching this gospel, and people are kind of getting butthurt about it. I've seen it in the social medias and the Reddits and Instagram and stuff. It's well, it doesn't have to be an AR. It's no, you're right. It doesn't have to be, but it does need to be something that you guys all have interchangeability with. And then on top of that, why not pick a platform that has dominated the last like 60 years? There's so much part availability, magazines, and ammunition to support an M16 family or AR-15 style weapon.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's what you need to do.
And that's another thing. Like magazines, they have a lifetime on them. Like,
yeah,
like you want to be able to, like, I mean, there's some rifles out there that take basically AR style platform magazines. So
yeah,
that would work too technically. But I'm just saying, like, have something you can find with some sort of availability. Like, it may still be super hard to find those kind of things, like if things do happen to be that way, because there's not going to be very many people building them anymore. Let's be real. And then most people that have them are going to be holding on to them.
Yeah.
Because they want them as well. Like,
yeah. So, I mean, that's honestly, that'll be probably a different part of our Minuteman layout is like logistical redundancies, having like spare parts and stuff like that. And we'll talk about the importance of that. But since we're kind of already on the topic of a rifle platform, having spare parts is just, you need to do it. Like, it's something that I'm working towards. So my personal rifle is it's a Knight's Armament SR-15, and it's a great rifle, but it's already got a lot of rounds through it. So I'm probably going to have to do a barrel change sometime in the near future. And also it's got a proprietary bolt carrier group. So kind of an issue, kind of a problem. It's also a problem because it's Knight's Armament, like, has like a cult following for whatever reason. And it's really hard to find parts for it. And they're very expensive. So I need to find at least one bolt carrier group that I can have for it. Or I need to just rebarrel it, with a mil-spec chamber, and then put a regular BCG in it, which is probably what I'll do. I'll probably get like a head-spaced, like, Criterion barrel setup that's just already good to go. And then whenever the time comes, it's like, boom. But I also think you should carry a BCG in your kit, like in your ruck or something. Because that's like, if you have a really nasty malfunction, or, God forbid you have a lug shear off, that stuff happens. You can just ditch that BCG, literally just chuck that thing to the wind. Or more realistically, if you have time, throw it in your kit. There's parts in there probably worth keeping.
Yeah.
But you can slide in a new BCG and be good to go. So that's another kind of point is on the AR-15 family is tons of availability on parts. Really cheap too. Like, you can stockpile parts and pieces of these things for a pretty reasonable amount of money.
Yeah.
So caliber, modularity, availability, these are things you need to be thinking about. Again, that the thought process on this is like one ring to rule them all. No, one rifle
to rule them all.
Yeah, no, one rifle to kind of do multiple jobs. So then you need to be thinking about, how do I feed and support that system to have longevity? Because the stuff we're talking about here is not like, yeah, I'm just chilling and everything's fine. No, we're talking about like some kind of major event where just jumping on Amazon and buying a new part for your gun. I don't know why I just brain farted on like any kind of part on a gun.
Yeah.
You got to buy a new buffer for your platform. That's not going to be an option anymore. So you're going to have what you're going to have. And that's, again, where you get into like, we're not saying to only have one gun, because it's probably important to have redundancies in gun platforms too, rifle platforms. But what we are saying is that, kind of going back to what you originally said, like, you need to try to get that thing set up all the way first with everything you think you need. And then after that, maybe get a rifle that is naked that you can then take parts off of and just put it on the new one. That's kind of a good way to think about it too. But anyway, so back to barrel length, because I kind of wanted to get that main thing out of the way. So moving forward, we're kind of talking about an AR-15 family platform. I think just with availability, all the things we've already mentioned, it's probably one of the best options you can make. Now, if you are making a different option, that's fine, but just take everything else we're saying and apply it to whatever platform you're going to have.
Yeah.
So barrel lengths, if you live in a super urban area, I wouldn't go any shorter than 12.5. And honestly, I would try to go as long as you can. For a 5.56, the longer your barrel is, well, 5.56 needs velocity to be effective. It's very deadly if it's moving fast. It's also more stable if it's moving fast. So these are important things. If you have a 7-inch barrel and you shoot a 5.56, that bullet is it's performing at such a low level, it's not even funny. Is it still deadly at close range? Absolutely. But you're extremely neutered with a barrel that short. Even down to like that Mark 18, 10.3, 10.5 range. The important thing to understand about a Mark 18 build, or like a really short build, is that was built. This is like something that really bugs me. A lot of people get them and build them, and they're like, yeah, we have a build we offer, and or a build we recommend. It's 11.5 inches. Sick, dude. Yeah, it's based around the Mark 18. That's awesome. The Mark 18 was built with a lot of specific things in mind, though. It was built for close quarters combat, CQB, and more specifically, like direct action CQB. So it was built for the SOCOM community. Mark is a naval designation, so for Navy Special Warfare, and it went beyond. Like, it's used by a lot of different people.
Yeah,
but it was used for very specific mission, like use cases and mission sets. It's not supposed to be
all they're doing. Basically, is they're gonna go kick down some doors, and that's it. That's what they're
direct action stuff, quick in, quick out. Hostage rescue, whatever it is, but all close range, like with lots of logistical support. It is not a full-on like duty rifle that is supporting multiple missions and multiple scenarios, and it was never designed to be that. So don't get hung up on the CQB platform thing. You're losing a lot of capabilities, especially when you start to get out at distance. And by distance, I don't even mean that far. I mean like 300 yards. Like 300 yards, 300 to 500 yards should be just no problem for a rifle setup.
Yeah.
That's a pretty typical engagement range, like especially if you live in a more spread out area, like a more rural area. Now, if you do live in an urban area, again, you're only helping yourself if you have a longer platform. So just a quick example. When I was in the military, we used 14.5 inch M4s. M4 is a 14.5 inch barrel.
Yeah.
I can't remember one time, and we were in super tight culottes and doing stupid training stuff, like in really tight CQB. But just thinking about like the Afghan buildings and structures overseas, they're really small and tight quarters. When you're going inside those and like maneuvering around, I never thought at one point like, man, I wish my gun was like shorter. It was very manageable.
Yeah.
And that's why I used to be like, I think 12.5 is such a sick like length, for like CQ home defense and trucks and stuff like that. But the more I've thought about it, it's like, man, maybe the shortest I'd actually go is like 14.5 or like 13.9, like that. 13.9 and 13.7 is a barrel length that's used.
Basically the length where you can pen and weld it and
have 16
and still have a rifle and not have to do paperwork on it.
Yeah. But so I think even if you are living in a very tight urban environment, having more barrel and more velocity is going to serve you more. You can collapse the stock down. There's techniques you can do where you break up over the shoulder. It's light recoil, so you can do a lot to manage like close quarters
either
stuff.
Over the shoulder or down the armpit. Like,
yep.
Honestly, I think when it comes to clearing rooms and kicking down doors, it just comes down to just technique more than anything. Like, I cleared rooms with a 249, like, and I didn't have any issues, and that's a big gun. Like, that's not an easy gun to lug around. Like, yeah, it's short, but it's still fat. Like, it's a girthy, just dote of a gun. So,
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't think, I think it just comes down to technique, just like anything, like, you got to know how to do it. and you can do it just fine.
Yeah. And then, it serves kind of that bigger picture too. Like if you are in a city and it's to the point where, which this is something you really got to think about. And again, that's a podcast we'll probably do later on, is like bug in versus bug out. We really want to do that. We talk about that a lot. We have a lot of customers that ask about it. We have a lot of conversations with our own guys about it. And we tend to always lean towards bug in. But something I will say though, is that if you're in an urban environment, cities are extremely dangerous to be in when there's like chaos and collapse, or like even open warfare. Extremely dangerous. And I think a very realistic effort or consideration should be fighting your way out of the city, trying to get out of that like heavily populated area and get to a more sustainable kind of like rural, more isolated in a way area. And again, this is like, I'm just kind of coming up with this on the fly. I mean, these are just concepts that there's a lot of data that supports that you're going to have a hard time staying alive in a city.
I think ultimately have a plan, because I wouldn't say just bug out without a plan.
Absolutely.
That would be, I think, pretty poor.
Yeah.
A poor decision, I guess. But
what I'm kind of leading up to is that if that is part of your plan, is getting out of that urban environment and going into a more rural environment, once you get out of that city, it's going to be really nice to have a lot more barrel length.
Yeah.
So, I think a 14.5 inch is a good length. We use, both Steven and I have 16-inch guns, and then there's a few guys that have 18-inch guns. And you can go, I mean, if you're living somewhere like we do where it's very rural, yeah, you can go that full 20 if you need to, like M16 length. But I think 16 and 18 is good. I mean, I've had, even with my gun, like, there's been a couple times doing like CQB stuff that I'm like, yeah, it's a little long.
I think the 16 is kind of a sweet spot, because if you're talking about then running a can on the end of your gun, which I think most people should run cans just because it helps hide you.
Yeah.
You're going to get pretty long with a 20-inch with a can on the end.
Oh yeah.
Like you're definitely got some length there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think personally, like if you're trying to do, in my own opinion, I think the multi-purpose rifle, 16 inches is like a beautiful sweet spot to be at, because you're still getting a lot as far as velocity out of that barrel, but you're still got something that's pretty manageable for doing some room work.
Yep.
So
yeah.
But did you want to keep going there?
Yeah, we can. I mean,
or do you want to just kind of like break down kind of like what we would suggest, like from kind of go Grantham and go tip to butt?
Yeah. If you've ever gone tip to butt, hit that subscribe button. Yeah, we can do that.
Because now that we're on suppressors anyways, like talking about, running a muzzle or a muzzle device, whether it's a brake or a flash hider or whatever you want to running something that is compatible with the suppressor out there. That way you're not having to expose your threads to thread on a suppressor,
Yeah.
We both run Surefires.
Yep.
Their QD suppressor system's pretty solid. Like it's legit. And then also on top of it, their cans are absolutely beasts. Like you basically can't shoot them out. Like, I mean, you can, but it's a lot of rounds.
There's a reason they won the SOCOM contract from Knights Armament, which is no small feat to do. They are tanky suppressors, and they last a long time. Like, there's a lot of people out there that have hundreds of thousands, over 100,000 rounds through them, which is crazy.
And they're full auto rated, so
yeah,
which a lot of cans aren't.
Yep.
They are not silencers, which I don't have a problem with. Like, they do make them quieter, obviously, but their main focus is flash suppression, which is ultimately what you want, especially like in an area like ours where it's going to be a lot of distance. You're not really worried about making noise because you're potentially having this firefight at a distance anyways. You're more trying to conceal your muzzle flash.
Yeah, I think especially for this kind of build or this role, don't be chasing decibels. I hear when people start talking about suppressors, they're like, or silencers or whatever you want to call them, they're like, yeah, well, the silencer code, whatever, or the this and that, the OSS, they do like decibel way better. And like, don't get so hung up on that, because I know it's cool to have like as quiet of a gun as you can. People start talking about subsonics and stuff. And yeah, that's I think that's a byproduct. Like, I would focus on a few other things. I would focus on like how well it performs at first round pop. So like, all suppressors have, like, they have air inside of them. So when you fire your first round, it's going to burn up that oxygen inside the can, and then it's going to blow it out the front. And they call that first round pop. Once that's happened, there's less oxygen in the can. It's kind of been displaced. So it should do a good job at flash suppressing. But first round pop's very important. If it just has a really bad, like if it's some cans can be really quiet but have really bad flash suppression, or more specifically that first round pop. That's something that kind of specifically like Surefire and Knights Armament are both really good at. They have really, really good signature reduction as a whole. And that's what you need to be considering, is signature reduction. That's flash and sound, both of those combined. And I can tell you firsthand that flash is by far the easiest way to identify someone, not sound. There was times that we were shot at and we never actually figured out, someone took like harassment pop shots and we never actually figured out where they were.
Yeah, you heard it, but you happened to not be looking the direction that they shot from.
Yeah, and they weren't suppressed. They weren't shooting suppressed. They were shooting.
But they didn't shoot a bunch. But if you did want to shoot a bunch.
Well, yeah, and it was also daytime, and so it was harder to identify, and we're looking around, and then they were gone, But I'll tell you what, though, at nighttime, we didn't go off of sound. We went off of muzzle flash, and we targeted the muzzle flash,
Yep.
That's where you plant your rounds, and you walk your tracers in on machine guns on muzzle flashes. That's how you do it. So that's a very, very important thing to consider. Stop thinking about decibels. Okay, we're not John Wicking around out here. We're using a can to reduce our signature as a whole. Now, sound suppression is important. It makes it even harder. If you have somebody running suppressed, it makes it a lot more difficult. And running suppressed, so you can't see the flash, and it's also muffled, and the sound is changed enough to make it even harder to pin down. Both those things combined are extremely valuable, especially if you've got multiple guns kind of spread out and you're running smart with, different teams and stuff like that, and getting into all those tactics. It's like, man, you can be very deadly. There's a reason why SOCOM units all run suppressed all the time. Like, it doesn't matter what they're doing. It's kind of funny. Like, in the movies, kind of used to have this perception of like, and I used to think it as a kid, like, we're going loud, and you just randomly take your suppressor off and like, that's not a thing. Like, they run suppressed all the time, even in the day. Like, I think there's this misconception that it's like, oh, when you're being stealthy and quiet and you're sneaking around, you need a suppressor because it's going to keep you quiet. No, your suppressor is 100% just signature reduction across the board. It's also going to reduce like debris and stuff flying up, because it baffles that.
It impulse. Also helps under night vision too, which is another big benefit. Like, you got to be thinking about nighttime operations. Like, as a shooter, if you have a whole bunch of flash, like let's say you're running a big old muzzle brake and you got a whole bunch of flash kicking out, your night vision is going to start auto gating to that because it's going to be too bright, and then it's going to screw up your vision.
Yeah.
So running cans are almost a must for nighttime fighting.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not, because I didn't run cans in the military, but
you ran flash. You ran flash suppressor or flash hider muzzle devices. Yeah. Which, that's the other thing I want to say. I think if you're going to get a muzzle device on your gun, I think hands down the safest route to go is a flash hider, a flash suppression device. Surefire makes great ones. There's a lot of good ones out there. Now, that being said, I actually run a muzzle brake. I love muzzle brakes. They're just fun on guns. But I've strongly considered changing it. But if you are running a muzzle brake and you are able to just always run suppressed, then that can actually be better. So a muzzle brake, because it's already braking that, and it's a muzzle brake like brake, so like brakes on a car. So it like, kind of implying that it slows down that impulse or dissipates that impulse. It actually acts as what they call a sacrificial baffle inside of your suppressor. So you have all these baffles that do the same thing inside of a suppressor, and it's all integrated inside the can. So it's distributed, and as the gases move through these baffles, they get diminished.
Yeah.
Now a brake starts that process early. So when you have a can attached and it's obviously fully covering your muzzle device, like on a Surefire, for example, the collar goes to the very rear of the muzzle device and locks onto the back of it. So your brake is now inside the can.
I think most muzzle devices that are set up to work with suppressors work that way.
Yeah, most of them do. Some of them are, like the collars on the barrel, like it's farther down the barrel and you mount it back farther. Like there's some Gym Tech adapters, and then you got the old school like
basically just
PRI stuff. Yeah. Anyways, but yeah, so you've got that muzzle brake inside the suppressor, starting that process before the rounds even fully exited the barrel. Yeah. So, or I guess right as it's exited the barrel. But anyways, so yeah, something to think about. I think, especially because suppressors aren't just off the shelf purchases. It's probably going to take people time to get them. You have to do a tax stamp and all that stupid stuff, which is retarded. I hate that, but it's worth. I think it's worth it. I think it's worth getting a tax stamp for, because if all this stuff goes down, all that stuff's going to go by the wayside anyways. Most likely, and who cares? So it's going to be nice to have one. But in the meantime, I think a flash hider muzzle device is probably the smartest way to go. So
cool.
There's compensators too, but honestly, as more time's gone on, I've found such a negligible difference between flash hiders and compensators that I don't think compensators are really worth it anymore. If you want that full like recoil management out of a muzzle device, then a brake is going to do it. Yeah. Compensator I feel like a compensator is kind of somewhere in the middle, but doesn't really do either very good at all. The Surefire War Comp actually hides pretty good, like flash wise, but it doesn't really to me, I don't feel like it manages recoil really that well. No. And like compared to a brake. And also it's like, it actually creates a gas hotspot. So if you have some compensators, like the War Comp specifically, if you have a can mounted on it, because of where those gases are exiting, it's not distributed very well. So it actually creates a hot spot inside the can, and it can wear it out faster. So
yeah,
kind of a little thing to consider there.
Side note.
Yeah.
So what would you say, like if I'm like a new guy and I'm trying to build one, do you think Surefire is probably a safe bet to go with?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is completely. I think this is one of those things that you got to be able to be interchangeable with. I think having similarity across platforms.
I would agree.
Again, for us, we run Surefire stuff, and that's just like every new like person that's building a new gun, they just go straight into Surefire.
Yeah,
because we're gonna have
because then you can have interchangeable cans and
you're cross compatible, and I think that is logistically, from a logistics standpoint, it's super important. It's super important. But there's a lot of other companies out there. Like if you're, if most of your group that you're already shooting with went Silencer Co., then that's fine. You can keep going down that. They make some pretty good stuff.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch, but I think, I tend to kind of lean, maybe it's a lazy way to look at things, but I tend to kind of be like, well, if SOCOM adopted it, especially over Knight's Armament cans, because Knight's Armament is known for just making really good stuff all the time. And like making not just good stuff, but strong, like heavy duty stuff. For
that
them
also goes to the whole, like, is it available thing?
Exactly. And that would probably be the biggest downside of like
going Knight's Armament
and Surefire. I think they're both harder to find. Surefire is easier to find than Knight's Armament though.
Yeah.
Like Knight's Armament, I mean, if you want to be super just Gucci and have a Knight's Armament set up, then dude's sick. But I don't know where you found it, and I don't want to know how much you spent on it.
And then also, you must be rolling with a wealthy group of guys if you're trying to do the cross compatibility.
Yeah. I know people are probably like, but you said you had a Knight's Arm and SR-15. Yeah, I bought that years ago. Like, when you could get them, and people knew what Knight's Arm it was, but it was like, it was kind of like buying any kind of high-end AR. It was just like oh, sweet.
Or whatever. Yeah. So we're kind of talking about nighttime fighting, so I guess IR illuminators / lasers and white light devices. That's going to be also a very important thing, I think, to have on your firearm.
Absolutely.
What do you want to get into first? Lights, probably. Lights are easier. Talk lights.
Yeah. I mean, you need a good light. And I've seen a lot of people kind of, because the reality of modern gunfighting is so tailored to like night vision capabilities and fighting at night, a lot of people have started to kind of recommend or steer away from white light capabilities. Like, yeah, it's just added weight. You're barely going to use it. I would tend to agree, but I just think on a multi-purpose rifle, having a white light is extremely important. Being able to identify things, like get positive identification on threats is extremely important. But then even beyond that, having a white light for like more administrative kind of capabilities, like searching, like if you clear an objective and you kind of set up shop and you're trying to like gather intelligence or do whatever, like a white light's extremely valuable to be able to pop on and use. You can also catch some people off guard. If you can use white lights, can be a kind of a what's the word I'm looking for here, or the term? It can be
almost like a shock and awe.
Well, I was going to say like a use of force progression. What am I trying to say? What is that called? Not a force multiplier. I mean, it is a force multiplier in a way, but basically you can use it to like
escalate.
Escalate your use of force.
Yeah, without going like deadly.
Yeah. So, for example, I'll just throw out a random scenario. If you're dealing with like looters and stuff like that, like it's a natural disaster and you're kind of setting up shop to guard your community against like violent looters, and you got guys coming into your neighborhood or whatever, wherever you're set up, and they're just like smashing around and they just get lit up by a bunch of dudes with rifles and they're like, yeah, get out of here. Those guys are going to tuck tail and beat feet. Like,
yeah,
that is, if you've ever been
lit up. They don't want
up,
any of that smoke.
Yeah.
They're like, nah, dude.
Everyone's a gangster until it's time to actually do gangster stuff, dude. If you've ever been lit up before by like dudes that got the jump on you and you're just white lighted into oblivion, dude, it looks like.
And even like from the perspective of like you're trying to be quiet, like I've even had it.
Yeah,
you're trying to be quiet and you accidentally like, I don't know. It's the same concept. Like if you're sneaking in your house, like I work nights, so like when I get off night shift,
yeah,
I'm trying to be quiet in my house. If I all of a sudden just like step on some weird toy that just makes a whole bunch of noise or something, because obviously I got little kids, so it's like, oh no, like like it's like a startle response that you get, like dang it. But the same concept, like people have motion lights and things like that obviously gets a response out of you. But if you have someone come out and start pointing lights and starts yelling at you all at the same time, you're like, whoa, dude,
yeah,
like I'm out.
Yeah. And it'll startle the crap out of you, like. And a lot of people have the idea of like, well, but then then they know where you're at. Like I hear that all the time, and it's so just it kind of drives me nuts. Yeah, you're not going to be. I mean, if you're out at 300 yards, like shining your white light out like that, then you're an idiot and you deserve to be capped. But if you're like close range, and you like smack somebody with a white light real quick, you immediately learn, like, is it somebody that I'm shooting, or like, is it someone that...
Yeah, you get positive ID quick.
Yeah.
With a white light. Like, I would say much faster than under nods with the IR illuminator at times.
And you're with modern lights today, like the amount of lumens they're pushing out and like just the amount of performance you're getting out of today's white lights, you aren't losing the advantage by, especially if you've got the jump on somebody, your weapon's trained at them, and you blast off that light at them, like you are catching them off guard, like 100%. So, but I mean, that's a very specific thing. I don't want to get too hung up on that. Like,
I think it's just important to have one.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's a mistake to not run one and just be like, oh yeah, because like what happens if you're like, you just got a spare like IR laser and illuminator like in your pack at all times, like if for whatever reason that were to go down, like at least you have a white light that you can potentially like use to like do room clearing or something if you're doing that. Or like it's like the same concept behind backup iron sights on your gun. Like I know there's people who are like, no, I don't do that, I have a good optic. It's like, dude, I'm always going to run backup iron sights. I don't care. Even if they never get used in my entire lifetime, I'm going to have them on there just because that's
weird
what
stuff
I do.
happens, dude.
Yeah.
Especially when bolts
People do that
around.
with handguns now too. They take their iron sights off, and I'm always just like, but why? Like, how much weight's that actually saving you? And like, I know you run a Trijicon RMR, but it's like, dude, that thing can break still. I don't care what you say. Like, things happen. But anyways, that's a rant.
Yeah.
As far as IR illuminators and lasers, what do you think? Like, there's a bunch of options here. This kind of gets crazy fast.
Super deep topic. I mean, it's so convoluted nowadays too. There's so many variations and configurations and options. Again, I think having some cross compatibility with the guys you run with is important, but not as important. I don't think either light or IR laser is important to have. Like,
going back to the lights, thing. What are some good brands?
Surefire.
Yeah,
no,
so
there's some other ones.
I was about to say, like, you got to think about things that are going to last. Like, I don't care about their warranty. I care about how often that warranty gets used. Like, if that warranty gets used a lot from certain companies, that means they make trash products. Like, I'm sorry.
No, I'm glad you said that. That is a mentality that really needs to shift. Like, well,
we'll get into that with optics, but
yeah. But Surefires have a fantastic reputation for being like cockroaches in the light industry. Those things just run.
Yeah, I mean, I have the old school like the old early 2000s like Surefires.
Yeah,
and they still run like no problem.
Dude,
like,
I've got an original Scout, like before they were called the Scout. Like it's an original, like 600 series basically.
Yeah, there's no flicker or anything either. Like all the electronic components are fantastic in them.
It's probably 15 years old now, still rocking and rolling. Like,
I think if you don't want to go Surefire though, Mod Light obviously makes pretty good stuff.
Yeah, and the benefit of Mod Light is that they're set up to run on Surefire components.
Yeah, so which I think is important. Like you get some cross compatibility in there.
Yep.
Cloud Defensive makes great lights.
Yep.
They're a little bit more
proprietary,
so there's that problem. Like their switches and things like that are going to be, I think, their own. I'm pretty sure. I don't have a ton of experience with Cloud Defensive. I just know that they make good stuff. Streamlight's not bad. Like if you're trying to stay on a budget, Streamlight's not a terrible option. But I would just save up a little bit longer. Okay, here I'm gonna dip into Haterville here, but Streamlights. I'll put it to you this way: Steven and I have been doing this for a long time, and I've ran multiple platforms, got tens of thousands of rounds through different platforms doing this kind of stuff. And I've taken a ton of classes, taught a ton of classes, and been in a lot of training environments. And I have rarely seen Surefires have problems. I'm not going to say I haven't. Like, especially in the military, I saw some issues, but we're talking like it'd be more like
fell
switch
off a
issues,
truck or like got smashed
like
about.
The switch got messed up or something.
Yeah,
it's like that happens. Whatever.
But especially I have seen just in like basic like civilian level classes and just dealing with customers and stuff here in the store, I've seen Streamlights have a lot more problems, especially in like circuitry and switches and them just randomly deciding to they just don't turn on anymore. Now Streamlight does take care of you, and that's usually what just contact Streamlight and
yeah, but that's going back to the
exactly.
Yeah, so it's going back to reliability. I don't really care how well they take care of you, because ultimately, are they going to be there to take care of you when it actually matters?
Yeah. That's like I had a customer one time. I was giving him his holster. we made the holster for him and stuff, and he was really happy with it. And I said, all right, and just a heads up, it's got a lifetime warranty, so if you ever have any issues, let us know. He said, whose lifetime? And I said, what? And he was like, lifetime of you or lifetime of your company? And I was like, kind of paused for a second. I was like, that's a really good question. I was like, I guess the lifetime of the company. He's like, all right. And he kind of smiled. Like he kind of just asked it to be, just to kind of joke around.
Like an old man.
He was old, yeah. And I was like, but I was just like, that's a good question. I was like, yeah, I guess lifetime of the company. He's like, all right. He's like, well, hopefully you guys stick around. Like it was pretty early on in our, like it was when we were pretty early on here. But it was a legitimate like question. I was like, yeah, I mean, like if the company's down and I'm still cruising around doing stuff and you run into me in town and you're like, can you fix my holster? I'm gonna be like, no, like, yeah. I mean, if it's something I could do, I'd probably do it just to be nice. But anyways, yeah, it's just kind of a random thing, but it just made me think of that.
That is pretty weird. I've never actually even thought about that before.
Yeah. I mean, same goes for all these companies. Not saying that, Streamlight's going to go out of business because and this is not a bash of Streamlight. They make good stuff. I really think they make good stuff. I just think, me personally, I'm going to trust a Surefire system over
and if you're taking this
system.
seriously, and if you're actually going with the concept like, hey, I'm going to finish this rifle, this one rifle, this is going to be my rifle. This is a tool. You take care of your tools, and your tools take care of you. That goes all the way from maintenance to like what you're putting on these tools,
Yeah.
I think I have that. I think that's starting to, like, more people are starting to get that way, but it's kind of taken a little while for people to kind of get that way. Like, I just want a bunch of cheap rifles so I have more toys. I want to fill up my safe. It's like, no.
Yeah.
Who cares how many rifles you have? Like, I don't have very many, honestly. Like, everyone's like, yeah, you guys probably have lots of guns. It's like, no, I don't.
I used to. I used to be a guy that did, but not anymore.
I have like a hunting rifle for hunting, and like literally that's just one. I have one hunting rifle.
Yep.
I got my AR. I got my handgun, and I got like a bear defense handgun. I think that's all I got right now. Like that is like they all have.
It's funny because you sold off. You
actually, I got two handguns because one of them's my wife's.
Okay. Yeah.
But that's hers, so I guess technically, yeah. No, it's not mine.
Yeah.
But
same. Yeah, I've got my rifle, my AR, obviously, is what I mean by my rifle. I've got a hunting rifle. I've got two handguns. One's kind of stays at home, so the wife can use it, and then one is my daily carry. And then I've got, and I used to have a kind of, like I said, like an 11.5-inch gun that I've since taken apart and piecing it out, and I'm actually selling it off and to put money back into a main squeeze because of this whole thought process. So, and on that, it's like, this does take time. I mean, I'm not even squared away yet. There's things that I have kind of changed up that I would like to switch to, and it's an evolving thing as you learn new things, or like as technologies change. I think
there's always advancements, and it's like, man, that makes so much sense. I got to put that on my gun. I don't have to, but I mean, I want to. So,
yeah.
But as far as illuminators and lasers, some people, you see people, I don't think it's necessarily a problem. I just think it's a little bit like, it's whatever. Guys running like basically mod lights with IR heads, and then like a IR laser solo, basically run off like a dual lead mod button, which it's an option. Personally, I think having a setup unit, I prefer, just because if the switch goes down, I can still run my IR laser and illuminer simultaneously.
You're illuminer, dude.
Is that what I said?
Yeah, illuminator, IR laser, and illuminer.
Dude, I just went deep south. No, but I can still run it with the built-in switch on that device,
right?
Which I think is beneficial. Yeah.
Which is important,
and to have I think
redundancy across your platform.
As far as like civilian IR lasers and illuminators, I think out there, your Steiner D-Ball D2 is a fantastic option.
A lot of people are saying I've seen it a lot on Instagram, that's the new civilian meta.
Yeah.
Which, like that's kind of the new strategy for civilian use, because IR lasers are regulated. So like full power IR lasers are regulated by the FDA, which is kind of weird. It's a weird federal thing to regulate, but whatever. So full power ones are regulated. You got to keep that in mind. You can get them. It's not illegal to own them. It's just, they're just not available for civilian purchase.
Yeah.
So you can buy them secondhand. And there's actually quite a bit of market for that right now. Like they pop up all the time. If you're looking in the right places, like if you're in Facebook groups and stuff like that, you can find them. The biggest thing I'll let you know though is, if you go that route, try to invest in redundancies, because if you have any issues with it at all, then it's done. Now, again, this kind of falls back into the same thing. It doesn't really matter, because if we're talking like big picture here, if you had a civilian, basically what I'm saying is if you have a full power one and you send it to the company for warranty work, you're not getting it back. Like
they're going to be like, thank you for my product back.
Yeah. But, in the whole big picture we're talking about, you're not going to be able to rely on that anyways. So there is a real thought process of like, well, maybe I just need to get a full power unit.
Yeah.
But
I think there's definitely benefit in going full power, but
yeah,
I'm just saying for accessibility and knowing that you're getting a clean illuminator and clean laser.
Yep.
There is some benefit going civilian. Now, which civilian models would I go with? There's basically only two that I would potentially go with right now, like from what I've seen. That's the D-Ball D2, if you can get past the ugly of it, because it's huge and chungus.
But it's not very heavy. It's surprisingly not as heavy as you'd think.
And then there's the Mall C1 Plus, which if you're going to go with the Mall C1 Plus, I heavily suggest you go with the extra battery pack, which makes it pretty large. And you're kind of getting into D2 territory as far as girth and size.
I think it's bigger, isn't it?
I think it gets heavier technically with that battery pack, and it's definitely longer. I don't know about like overall size. Like it's probably close to the same though, as far as how much footprint it's taking up on your rail.
And it's taking up footprint off on the side of your rail, so that kind of helps things out too.
Yeah,
you're not really losing a lot of real estate.
But its battery just sucks. I'll say that, and I think that's even the full power Mall. Like they just aren't good as far as battery power.
Mm-hmm.
Like they just burn out, which makes sense because they are pretty impressive how much power they have, especially the full power one. But just keep that in mind. They don't last very long. Like they are pretty weak sauce when it comes to battery time.
Yeah.
The D2 actually does really good with that. So there is some negatives with the D2. It's LED. It's got an LED illuminator, so it does give like a red glow on the illuminator. But me personally, I don't think you're going to see that.
Well, I mean, we've tested it too, and it's very, very, very hard to see unless you're pretty close and you're literally like straight on with it.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty negligible. Something I will say, though, that is important to consider, and maybe we should have said this first, but do you even need an IR laser and illuminator? And the reason you need to consider this is because there's a lot of products, techniques, and training out there to support just passive IR shooting. So using your nods, shooting passively through your optics, so you're not having an active IR signature that's being blasted out into the universe. So if you use your IR aiming device, you're going to send out an active IR signature that's visible to anyone else with night vision. Now, there's big benefits to this. If you're fighting someone that, if you're using it against people that don't have night vision, for example, you have a massive advantage. It's very fast. It's awesome because your whole team, as long as you're all using night vision, can see like what
you're shooting at, what the engagement's at. Yeah,
there's a ton of things you can like actively identify someone with the illuminator without them having any clue that you're doing so.
Yep.
But if you're battling people that also have night fighting capability, then using IR illuminators and or lasers could be a death sentence for you. I mean, it like when we were in the military, they treated it like it got treated with the same consequences as like a negligent discharge, which a negligent discharge is when you know, out of negligence, being an idiot, fire off your gun accidentally.
Yeah.
Or again, we didn't really, there's technically an AD and an ND. You have a negligent discharge and an accidental discharge. A lot of people get those confused. An accidental discharge is referring to it was a mechanical failure within the weapon or the system or whatever that completely unrelated to the user input fired.
Yeah.
Whether that's a light, laser, or firearm. So 99.99% of the time it's negligence because it's rare for that to happen, for there to be some kind of accidental discharge. A negligent discharge is any user input at all that is done to the point of negligently firing whatever that device is. So, yeah, it's treated with the same consequence. So you get in huge trouble if you negligently discharge a firearm. And if you're in a tactical training environment, or even worse, if you're in a real environment and you accidentally blast off your IR device, it's treated the exact same way because you endangered your whole entire unit because you just put an active signature out there that can be picked up and you can now be identified, targeted, and killed.
Yep.
So, now I think both Steven and I probably agree on this, but I think there's so much benefit to having an IR laser and illuminator that even if you're not sure what you're going to have to do, having both capabilities, being able to passively aim and actively aim, I think are both important enough to invest in having it.
And I think that's part of having, like, I think that should be considered part of this build, just like having that ability.
Yeah.
As far as, so those are kind of my two civilian approved. As far as full power, if you can get your hands on them, like we said, they're somewhat available. If you can get, decent shape, PEG 15s are solid. I don't like their civilian model at all. They're pretty much trash.
Yeah.
Their full power's obviously solid. That's what we used in the military. Mm-hmm. If you can get a full power Angol, obviously that would be legit too.
Amazing.
Yeah, but they're I think like $10,000.
Yeah. And you're not finding them. They're hard to find secondhand even. So.
Yeah, your full power. Obviously your full power. Any of the Steiners. So I think the A3.
Yeah.
They make a full power D2 as well, which that'd be cool. But
it's the A2, isn't it?
Is it the A2? I don't know.
It looks a little different. But
I can't keep track of all the weird nomenclatures and stuff.
It looks like a transformer, dude.
Obviously the full power Maul's fantastic.
Megatron.
If you're going full power, I see so many people like going after the purse and stuff like that. I'd stay clear of it, especially since it's Russian made. Like
for Mother Russia.
Yeah, I mean, right now, good luck even getting them. But
they're just not that good. I think people kind of are falling prey to the hype train on those.
Well, I think what it is they're more available. You can get them pretty much new as a civilian, with like barely any use on them, if not brand new. And I think that's where the hype is that, I'm not getting a salty PEG 15, I'm getting a full power Purst.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still Russian.
Yeah.
Which
Russia is not known for their night fighting capabilities as, Exhibit A, Ukraine conflict.
Yeah.
Like, they suck at fighting at night, so I think they're still capable.
Yeah.
But not compared to a lot of the American-made stuff.
Yeah. And then also on that same vein, actually, I'll get into, what do you think about switches? Like pressure switches for your IR device and your white light devices.
I'm a fan of switches. I think it's just important to have redundancy. I think you kind of already talked about it earlier, but switches can add benefit. They can add convenience. They can help.
But it's also one more mechanism to run your stuff. So you're not relying solely on the actual built-in mechanism. Now, when you're running white light, I suggest you run the tail switch that has has the button as well as the what is that switch called? I wanted to say crane, but that's what goes into the IR.
It's just it's the Surefire plug. It's their own.
Yeah. So if you're going to be running that, just if you can, depending on what light setup you're running, I would suggest going with something like that, just because
having redundancy. Yeah.
Obviously, holding 0 on your IR laser is super important. That kind of is where you get into the rail. So what do you think about... Are we done with switches, actually? Did you have anything else to say?
All I was going to say is treat switches like a add-in kind of convenience. Like, they're nice because you can consolidate stuff on switches. You can get it set up like so you don't have to compromise your shooting grip and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So they're nice, but don't act like it's, I would avoid platforms that rely solely on a switch.
Yeah, I would too.
Switches can fail, and they do fail. There's, they have a solenoid inside of them, and technically they have, everything wears out. They have a certain amount of fires, that you can, or button presses, and then they start to wear out. Circuitry can fail, There's just so many things that can happen. So having the redundancy of a switch, and then, actually making sure you have both devices, like you said, your light and your IR device that can be fired manually or deployed or initiated, turned on, on the device itself. I think as long as you got both of those covered, then I don't have a problem with switches. The only other thing I'd say with switches is make sure you have clear designation between white light capability and infrared capability. Be careful, because accidentally blasting off a white light at nighttime when you don't mean to is extremely bad.
Yeah.
So
and that's why some guys just don't even run a white light switch. A lot of people think that's a good philosophy, and if you don't have the discipline to keep your fingers from smashing buttons, then maybe that's a good idea for you as well.
Yeah.
But me personally, I run a switch for my light just because, and I position it in a way that it's not.
You have to go out of your way to.
Yeah, a little bit. Obviously, I'm not completely changing my grip because that defeats the purpose of it. But you got to kind of work. It's not your natural, like your actual natural grip is like right where that switch is at.
And there's really cool products out there now. Like there's I think HRF Solutions, right? Is that the name of that company? They're making like switch platform buttons on like different angles and stuff, so you can have some like tactile input to know. The other, it's like a really common trick people do is they put like grip tape or something like that on their white light switch, so they can kind of touch it with their thumb and know like, oh, that's my white light. And then another good thing you can do that Steven and I kind of like is if you're legitimately worried about something and like you want to go full infrared, you just unplug your stuff.
Yeah.
So you literally just grab that switch plug and just pop it out, and then there's no way your light's going to come on.
Yep. And then I would also encourage, if you are going to run switches, wire management, just because things do get snagged on stuff, especially when you're running CQB type operations, or just being out in the woods, branches, things like that. It can snag, and then you go to try to run it, and it's been unplugged or broken or whatever. But having a clean management, whether that's just running zip ties, or there's people that make like impact weapon component, or not impact weapon components,
emissary development.
Yeah, emissary development makes wire management stuff, and there's a few other companies that do it as well, but it's a good route to do if you are going to run switches. I think it's smart. It just keeps everything clean and up out of the way. So
yeah.
But with IR lasers, obviously, you do have to have those zeroed, and if they're not zeroed, they're not doing much for you. So that's where rails come into play, and where some people are just like, well, I'm going to try to get the thinnest, lightest thing possible, and that's what makes sense because I don't want to have a bunch of weight. It's like, okay, yeah, but are you planning on running an IR laser because you want to be able to hold a zero? And there's been a huge wave of companies building rails that are built for this purpose, I guess. So I think that's important to look into when you're actually getting the rail or whatever. If you're buying a full rifle, making sure that full rifle's got a solid rail on it.
Yeah. And I think that's something people have gotten better about. I will say, though, that a lot of your like mass production companies like, Aero Precision, and Aero Precision's doing pretty good stuff, but as far as I know, Aero Precision isn't making rail systems that are super reliable for like being tough and not warping, and rails even can warp under heat.
Yeah.
So
yeah, which goes back to like that light thin rail. Like obviously it's closer to the barrel, so it's going to get hotter faster. It's light, so it's got thinner metal, which means it's going to get hotter faster as well. So it's like,
yeah,
all that combined can be a potential problem.
Yeah, so it's something you got to think about, because ultimately your IR laser, if you're using that for aiming, it's got to be zeroed, and if your rail warps, then your zero is pointless to you.
Yep.
So good rails, I mean, anything from Knight's Armament is a tank of a rail. It's going to work really good.
Yeah, your quad rails are all going to do pretty decent. Like,
yeah.
The Daniel Defense quad rails, obviously, they're tanks.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, pretty much quad rails are going to be solid at it.
Yeah, and Knight's Armament rails like the Riz.
Yeah,
and
the
stuff
Knight's
like
Armament
that, or, I
is
mean,
going to be solid.
Riz is Daniel Defense. What do they call them? I don't know. Well, any of the URX rails are good.
Yeah, even their newer rails, like the
URX4.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a beast.
It'll
The URX4 is a
fine.
tanky M-Lock rail. It's probably one of the best M-Lock rails you can get right now. The Bravo Company makes good stuff. I have heard that they're a little bit thin, and they are susceptible to some warping here and there, but they're such a solid company, and they're thinking about duty purpose all the time that would probably be a pretty safe
They got a
route
pretty
to go.
decent lockup on their barrel nut too, which is like the way it's designed is pretty solid as well. But
Yeah.
obviously Geisley.
Geisley made the Mark 16 rail for the URGI SOCOM uppers, and they actually had some problems. They had some warping issues. But I've heard that their new Super Duty rails, which it's an upgraded Mark 16 rail, are really good.
And that's probably why they probably updated them for that purpose and that purpose alone. Like we got to fix this problem.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of their other rails are super solid, like the Mark 4s and stuff.
You can
like
almost look at rails too. Like if you're curious, like they have that, obviously it's going to be a weight problem, but they got that end barrel nut, like where they got that built-in support, like extra. I don't know.
Anti-rotation.
Yeah, the anti-rotation. Like any companies that are building rails like that, they're going to be better than not having that for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a few other companies out there that probably build decent rails, but I would just say that that's something to look into.
Actually, if you're building one fresh and you're like piecing it together, I would highly consider looking at Ripcord Industries. They're making some really cool barrels. They're pretty low profile. They're anti-rotate.
Pretty cool. Rails or barrels?
I'm sorry, rails.
Yeah.
Rails, yeah. They have put a lot of thought and engineering into making sure they don't warp and they don't rotate and they don't compromise your IR device zero. And they also make them as long as they can be, pretty much, to kind of work with muzzle devices on different length barrels, which is pretty cool. So
yeah. And that's obviously important too. If you're building it from the ground up, make sure that you get a rail that's not going to screw with, like, just do the homework and figure out what length you need, so that way your it will operate properly and all that stuff. So
yeah,
we kind of touched barrels, but gas systems, like, what do you think?
I don't really care as much about gas. I mean, I think so mid-length gas systems are super nice, but honestly, as long as it's a reliable platform,
it's functioning properly,
yeah, and you've got it tuned, and you've got redundancy for it, you've got some logistical backup for it. So carbine length is the most common. You're going to find it everywhere. If you're running mid-length, it's become super common as well, because mid-length is such a nice, smooth system. For your gas system, just having gas tubes and blocks, I think, like extra ones, those are super cheap. You can get a really nice quality gas block for like $30-$40, and then you can get tubes for like $15. So just having a few of those laying around just goes back, and then some like roll pins and stuff to swap them out. That goes back into just logistical support for the platform. So I just say whatever you use. If you're building, I'd probably recommend mid-length. I think, as long as you're 14 and a half and above, or like, 13.9 or whatever. As long as you're right in that territory, I think mid-length is going to serve you well. But just make sure that, don't chase like soft. Yeah, I for this kind of a build, don't get too caught up in chasing like super soft recoil, and that stuff's important because it increases the longevity of your platform. Because if it's a violent recoil and stuff like that, if things are smacking around real hard, it's going to wear out faster. But a lot of military style duty weapons tend to be overgassed, and there's a reason for that. It's so it functions in a wide array of environments, like humidity, thin air, mud, sand, rain. So it's something to consider too. Don't get too caught up in like making it like a super smooth, crispy race gun. It's a duty gun.
But also, you're not going to be deploying with it either to potentially a bunch of different countries, so you can kind of get it set up for your environment. Just think about all your different seasons and kind of get it where it runs well in your area. And
then put it to work. Like, take it out there and make sure it's going to run. Like, go out there in the mud and the rain and the muck and the mire and smash around, see how it does.
Optics.
Yeah, this is a huge topic. Again, very dependent on where you live. But I'm just going to go ahead and say it's really hard for me to not recommend something like an LPVO. Or an ACOG. An ACOG is also for a multi-purpose rifle. An ACOG is pretty solid. The only thing I'm not a huge fan of the ACOG is it's got a pretty tight eye box.
Yeah.
So you got to have it positioned like really specifically in order to give you good eye relief and stuff like that. And that's all fixed. It's also fixed magnification, which a lot of people are like, oh, it doesn't work good for CQB. That's trash. It actually works great for CQB. You just got to practice with it, like both eyes open. But where I would say it has some limitations is identification at distance.
Yeah.
That 4 power it's on the tail end of what I think you need. I think even 6 power nowadays is a little bit low. I think 6 is like still good though. It's that 1 to 6 LPVO is still a really nice like ranging capability, more for identification. And I think a lot of people get hung up on like, yeah, but on 1 power it's still not as good as a dot. You hear stuff like that, and yeah, that's true. But it's still, you train with it, and I would say it's negligible. Like you can be almost just as fast. You're starting to talk about like tenths of a second, maybe.
Yeah.
And just train with it. But the capability you get out of having like that magnification, 1 to 6, 1 to 8, now 1 to 10s are becoming popular and common,
Yeah.
And it's really hard to not, in my opinion, it's hard to not go that way, especially with how tough they are now. Like Leupold, for example, it's like, man, a Leupold optic is an absolute brute. They're light. Another one that, again, Trigicon tank of an optic, kind of heavy, but really good overall. I think some of their reticles need a little bit of work personally, but really good like eye box, like especially on those Credos or it used to be the AccuPower.
Yeah.
Man, those things, like you've got the 1 to 8 AccuPower, which is the predecessor to the Credo line, but it's a really nice optic.
It's got a really forgiving eye box for sure. Like,
yeah.
It might as well be a red dot because pretty much wherever I put my head, I'm gonna be able to see through it.
Yeah, and it's that.
It does get heavy though, I will say that. So like if you are kind of in a more urban environment, if you're trying to go LPVO still, go on something like a Night Force or something that's lighter, smaller.
The Night Force NX8 is a beast. It's 1 to 8, really good, super small, super light.
Those new Leupold Patrol.
It's a 1 to 6, but yeah, that thing is
light
super
too, though.
Light.
Yeah.
I think it's right under 16 ounces. Like it's like 15.8 ounces or something. Which is insane. Very light. In contrast, I think the Trigicon Credo is like 29 ounces or something, so it's quite a bit heavier. And then the EOTechs are making some pretty good LPVOs, also heavy. Vortex, they make some stuff. Now, I don't want to just straight up crap on Vortex, but a lot of people buy Vortex because the price is right, and they do make some really nice optics, like the glass and the clarity and things like that. But they don't have the best reputation for being long lasting and being reliable. And I'm sure a lot of people right now are like, what? But you just look at the numbers, and everyone always talks about their warranty. And it's kind of funny because
their warranty is so well known because
it gets
so
used a lot.
To use it.
Yeah. So that's something to really think about. I'm not saying go sell your Vortex, but what I am saying is maybe have a backup optic. Maybe get a second one.
Or I think a lot of that's returns, like straight out of the box, like issues.
Yeah.
With Vortex. I don't necessarily think that they don't make tough optics. I think they do make pretty tough optics, but they...
Oh, I think so too. Yeah.
Maybe their quality control is not nearly as good as some of these other ones.
Yeah.
And they do get broken and people use it. But all these other companies, all these like Leupold, Night Force, Trijicon, they're going to take care of you too if you break their stuff.
Yeah.
It's just their stuff's not getting broken as much, so
yeah,
you don't have to use it.
That's like, I'm a big Leupold fan. Like I've always really been a fan of them. And there's like a misconception that they don't have a lifetime warranty. Like people are like, yeah, I'd use Leupold, but Vortex has a lifetime warranty. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like Leupold also has a lifetime warranty, and it's just as awesome as Vortex. It's same thing. It's like no questions asked, send it in. But you don't hear about it as much because those optics are incredible, like out of the box.
Yeah.
So anyways, you can spend a lot of time on optics as far as like LPVOs and stuff go. But I think for a multi-purpose rifle, being able to do a lot with it, I think it's really hard for me to not recommend something with magnification, just because
you're so limited with a red dot.
Yeah.
And even with a magnifier on a red dot, it's not a bad option. Like if you want to go that route, I guess it kind of depends on the environment. I mean, a magnifier on a red dot's actually not too bad, but
I think for urban environments, that might be the move. Like that might be the meta. Like having a red dot, like a T1 or a T2 or something with like, now they get those 5-power magnifiers.
Yeah.
Like if you're going magnifier, go all in and get the big boy. Just keep in mind that it amplifies your parallax. So you might have a point of impact shift, depending on, when you're shooting through one of those, if you don't have a good cheek weld and stuff like that, which you have the same thing with an LPVO. So that's getting kind of specific, and that's a training issue. That's something that you need to just work through. But I think I'm not saying don't get a dot. I think dots are awesome. I love dots. I mean, they're so just breezy and easy to use, and they're simple. But having ranging capabilities, also like being able to reticles that have like BDC, like bullet drop compensation and stuff like that, it gives you a lot of info. Or even just like mils, like if you know how to read mils or MOA, minutes of angle, then you can look at somebody, figure out how far away they are. There's a lot you can do with an LPVO that you can't do as much with a red dot and a magnifier, but you can still ID pretty good with like 5-power or even 3-power. But something with magnification, I think, is what I would say. And personally, I think variable magnification, which you could kind of argue that like a flip to side magnifier is kind of variable, because you can either pop it off or flip it to the side, and just run that dot. You could passive aim through it and do all that, or flip it back, and use the magnification. So, and here's where things get extra crazy, and it's going to be like, holy crap. And this is kind of where the rubber meets the road here. If you're running an LPVO, they're very, very, very hard to passive aim with. They're almost impossible because of the light transmission. They don't, magnified optics have less light transmission than just like a dot, like a dot sight. So having an optics package, we think is it's expensive, and people are like, oh my goodness, probably. But having an optics package as a whole, I think, is the way to go. Where And if you're able to do this, then do it. You have an LPVO, like 1 to 6, 1 to 8, 1 to 10, something in there. And then 12 o'clock mounted, you've got a 1-power like T2 or something, There's a lot of dot sights out there that I think are capable. But because that does two things for you. One, it kind of handles the CQB situation. If you do have an optic that you don't think is as good on one power and stuff, or you have it set up for more like precision shooting where it's like a very low height over bore, like lower 1/3 or absolute co-witness or something like that. Then you can have a dot sight mounted 12 o'clock on top of that optic, so directly on top of it, and it gives you the CQB capability, so you can just look over top of that magnified optic. You can even keep it powered up, and it doesn't matter. You're just looking through your one power. But more importantly, it gives you the capability to shoot passive night vision,
which
regardless.
Is a redundancy, but also very important because night vision is becoming more and more common as as our world continues to rely on just technology in general. Night vision, thermals, things like that. It's just a way of fighting now. So that's where we're at, and it's not going to go away anytime soon, I don't think. So it's just going to get more and more advanced. Yep. But yeah, what do you... so some guys may try to run like a 45-degree mount. You would say 12 o'clock over that, probably.
Yeah, so I've actually ran a off angle, like a 45-degree mount for years now, and I still have that set up on my rifle currently, but I'm going away from it. I'm going to 12 o'clock mounted. I've ran enough platforms now, especially passive shooting, that you can passive shoot with that setup, but
it's a pain.
It's kind of a pain. It's kind of clunky. That was more of a daytime shooting kind of setup. The other big reason that I like it is that, but you can do this with the other one too, it's just a little bit easier with the 45-degree. You can use it to snap to other ranged targets. So if you're let's say you're all the way on 8 power, shooting at a target that's at like 400 yards, and then you've got another target that presents itself at 420 yards, off like more to the right or something.
Yeah,
it's harder to, and I'm sure everyone's experienced this, looking at something and then like trying to get your optic over there and like
find it,
then looking through magnification and trying to find where that target's at is kind of difficult. So you can roll the gun over to that 1 power, set that 1 power dot right on that target because you have all the field of view, and then you rotate back to full power and you're just it's like you're like right on top of it. You just snap on the target.
People do that with spotting scopes too. They'll mount like basically a red dot on the side.
Yeah, or the top.
Or on the top, and they just basically do the exact same thing.
But yeah, what I was getting at is you can do that same capability. It's a little bit of a different. Basically, instead of rolling the gun in your shoulder and keeping your head in the same position, you just lift your head up and go back down. So you can do the exact same thing with it 12 o'clock mounted, and night vision, passive shooting, and aiming is way better.
Especially if you're going to do ocular aiming.
Yeah.
I think the 12 o'clock is like far superior if you're
playing occluded aiming.
Yeah. Is that what it is?
Occluded, yeah.
Oh, I've been calling it wrong all this whole time then. What is ocular aiming?
I mean, just using your eye. I don't know.
Occluded. There we go.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's far superior if you're going to do that, because obviously if it's at 45, then you have like an optic that's like kind of getting in the way of where your actual night vision's at.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, and the other, so I think that's the way to go. I think that's for a multi-purpose rifle, I think that's the best optic setup, is a good, reliable, tough LPVO with good, reliable, tough dot sight mounted 12. Just make sure that you're smart about it. Don't cover up your dials. Like, don't block your dials with your optic. Like, I've seen a lot of mount setups where people are running their dot sight like in front of their dial.
Weird.
Which I understand it, because it's people that are running capped LPVOs, so they already have their zero dialed and they're running BDC. So they're not running dials for changing ranges. But if you do have a setup, I still think it's important to be able to access those and like see them and make adjustments. Sometimes things aren't perfect, conditions change. And that's why having data on personal equipment is really important.
And you can do that with ACOGs even too. You can have doctor sites or whatever. So
there's people making full on T1 or T2 mounts now for ACOGs, which is crazy.
So you still have that ability, and it puts it at the right height where you're basically keeping the rifle where it would be at if you were just running your IR laser. It's kind of not brought up to your face like you're actually aiming. And I mean, you're obviously aiming, but
yeah.
As far as receivers and internals, it's kind of going to be breezy, but
yeah, I think we've talked about internals quite a bit, like having, stick with mil spec. Triggers you can go down the rabbit hole on. I'm a huge fan of Geisley triggers. Say what you want. But there's people out there that are like a Timney or whatever.
Yeah.
Just get something you can rely on for a long period of time. And there's a lot of people that make triggers, but my experience so far, mil spec, duty purpose triggers, and are gonna last longer. And Geisley really designs good triggers in that vein. Like, they're extremely good, high performing triggers. Like, there's people that are like, well, you could get a better trigger. Like, yeah, you can. But as far as mixing that good performance, like good weight and consistency, like, they break very consistent, they reset very consistent, but then also having reliability mixed in, I think it's hard to look past Geisley.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. As far as receivers, forged or billet?
Forged. I'm a lover of the forged receivers. I think ultimately it doesn't really matter too much.
Yeah. I personally have a billet lower, but that's because I'm the old lefty special, so there's not very many forged.
Forged or stronger. Like, there's a lot of data on that. Now, and again, we're talking billet aluminum. Like, it's not like it's weak. I think people get a little hung up on that. Like, they're like, well, you have a billet. It's like, okay, But there is a lot of data to support and a lot of trial information out there you can look up that forged receivers tend to do better with, like, temperature variation.
Yeah.
So, like, hot and cold and changing temperatures fast, and they tend to do better there. They're stronger. There's also just, their mil-spec forged stuff, so it's like they're everywhere. So as far as availability and parts and stuff, when you get into billet, a lot of times when you start going ambidextrous and stuff, you start getting into proprietary territory.
Yeah.
Whoa, proprietary territory. So yeah, I think, would you agree?
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Even though I have a billet upper or a forged upper.
Yeah.
But yeah,
But yeah, internals, I think everybody goes through a phase with ARs where they want to upgrade everything. It's like, oh, my takedown pins, I have aftermarket takedown pins, and like I have these, everything, you start going down this crazy this crazy road of trying to upgrade everything and changing colors and mix match, and that stuff really doesn't matter. And honestly, if you have a good, reliable platform, the more stuff you change, the more you're affecting the possible reliability of that platform. I think if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'm not saying don't put a better trigger in or something like that, because I think triggers are so good now that you can do that.
Yeah,
just make sure you're doing it right.
Shooting as well. So
for sure,
you're gonna see the upgrade in performance just from a shooter's perspective. I think with a better trigger, but
like getting into buffer weights and stuff like that. I think, or just internals in general, where you're starting to like really fine tune stuff. I think it ultimately can be overdone.
Yeah, I'd agree. I would say, certain systems, it's going to it's going to be very dependent, on the build. Sometimes you're going to have to go like a heavier buffer just because your gun's like way over gassed to the point that you're going to start breaking stuff. Like, I remember I switched to an A5 buffer tube with an A5 buffer because my gun I actually broke a bolt because I was so overgassed. And not very many rounds, like probably just over 1,000 rounds. So obviously I had to switch that. So that's going to be stuff that you're going to potentially have to upgrade. And the only way you're going to find that out is if you go out and shoot it and get it dialed in. I'm not saying make it so light shooting that you're going to end up having malfunctions, because that's the other end of it. Like, you're just going to not have like good feeding issues. But I would say somewhere in between is a good spot, like where you're not over gassed, but you're gassed enough that it's going to be able to function in, all different types of environments. But as far as like your BCG, obviously I'd just say like get a reliable one, get one that's solid,
and then have some backup.
Yep,
that's all I'd
like
say
you
there.
said. Charging handles, we both love Radians. Charging handles, we've been running them since
the best charging handle.
Since they were Rainier arms and they weren't Radian.
Yeah.
But they're solid for if you do have malfunctions and stuff, having a little bit more extra stuff to try to override that bolt if it gets locked up or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where they're beneficial over like your standard mil-spec charging handle.
Yeah, I think two things to look for in a charging... actually, I'll say three things. The first one is avoid gimmicks. If it's something that you repetitively see across the industry, like you see a lot of high-end guns coming standard with it, or a lot of people spending good money on their guns, their platforms, and they're getting them, that's a good sign. That's something that works. Making sure it's going to be reliable. There are some charging handles that break, but the two main things besides that, because that's kind of an obvious one, would be make sure you can do one-handed manipulation, meaning that you or one side manipulation, meaning you can just pinch with your thumb and index finger one side and run that run that charging handle. You shouldn't have to do the old school like two fingers grabbing each side of the charging handle thing anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or like having to break grip to do it. Like you should be able to keep firing control and run that charging handle. So that's a feature I would look for, something that enables you to do that. So maybe a larger latch or
so if you're left-handed, you will need
something ambidextrous.
Yeah, something that can be ran either side.
Yeah. So that's where I think the Radian does a really good job. On that same note, you don't want something too big that it's going to latch onto your kit all the time and like pop your gun out of battery. That's stupid. I've seen that, and it's like people run these big old competition style latches, and we're not in the early 2000s anymore. Like, put those away. Like, slap those on a random build that you need to sell and send it out the door. We don't need those anymore. But something that works, that's you can grab onto easily and manipulate with, left or right-handed. It doesn't matter either way. And then the final thing I would look for is something that cuts down on gas. We talked about running a can, so if you're running a can, something that's going to either break up or diminish the amount of gas that's blowing back in your face. And if you haven't shot a suppressor, that might sound kind of weird, but that gas can obscure your vision. It can, literally spray debris at your face, like pieces of carbon, and it's not really good for you either to be breathing it in, honestly. So that's another thing to think about. So good, reliable, strong stuff. Again, I think you should have a redundancy. It's good to just have some backup charging handles. Charging handles break. They're pretty simple little pieces of equipment, and they're not super tough. Well, actually, they are. Some of them are really tough. Like I have an original AXTS Raptor.
Yeah, same here.
Before it was Radian, and I still have it to this day. Like it's a beast. And then, but yeah, so reliable, strong, can manipulate it on one side of the gun with one hand without having to do funky stuff, and then breaks up your gas a little bit. So
yeah,
which is actually why I think I'm trying to get one of the Radian SDs. They have like the little
vents
or like the teeth, I guess, that cut down on gas coming back, because mine does not do anything really right now to eliminate gas, but so that will probably just become a redundancy. I'll take that out, put it, save it in my backup parts kit, and then try to switch to a SD.
Yep. And then as far as like other considerations like furniture and things like that, you can't go wrong with Magpul, obviously.
Yeah.
Stocks, grips, foreign stuff.
Yeah.
Magpul, BCM, B5.
Honestly, those three, if you do one of those three or combinations of those three, you're going to be solid. I don't really know why you'd go anywhere else after that. Like you named all the three that I would trust. B5 Systems makes good stuff. They make the SOP mod stock. That thing's been around forever, and it's just a good solid stock. It's got battery compartments. It's got good cheek weld. I prefer kind of a slimmer stock personally, but they still work really good. Yeah, Magpul, any of the new Magpul stuff, they have such a tight lockup on your gun, like on the buffer tube, like those Magpul SL stocks.
Yeah, I like them.
That's what we run. They are so, I mean, you know, don't get hung up on like, yeah, but it's harder to change stock positions. It's like, that's not a thing. Like, I mean,
dude, what are you talking about? I change my stock position every time I go into a room. Change it to a different one. I need a different, no, just kidding.
No, you should set up a length of pull.
The only time I change it is if I'm going from not wearing body armor to wearing body armor, pretty much.
Yeah.
And it's like,
and it's easy.
That's before I even do anything.
Yeah, that's easy to do.
So
nice capability, but you shouldn't be making your stock decisions on that. You want to have the tightest lockup you can have on the buffer tube, because ultimately you're planting into that and you're cheek welding on that, and if it's wobbling around, it's going to affect precision and stuff at distance, or it could. I'm not saying it does, but it could.
Which all three of those companies do pretty good jobs.
Yeah, I'd say B5 is the worst out of all of them as far as lockup on the buffer.
Yeah,
but BCM and new Magpul stocks are very, very tight.
Yeah.
And they're all of those are also not going to get bumped out of position easily. That's something that happened a lot with the kind of older car stocks, which those are super, talking about sexual, dude. The car stocks are something to look at. I love them. Like, whenever I'm done setting everything up, I do want to I kind of want to become I kind of want to join the battle of the Clone Wars and start making some clone rifles, man, because they are so fun and cool. But like, oh man, for those of you that follow Red Rocket Actual, he's a bro of ours, and we smash about with him. And he just built a Mark 12. Like, it's not clone correct, but it's very close.
We should bring him on, and literally the podcast should be called Clone Wars.
I was thinking about bringing him on for SPRs though, because he's set up so many different SPRs. So whenever that part comes, but anyways, the Mark 12 is one of my favorite like AR configurations ever. I love it. There's just something so just amazing about it. I don't know what it is, but so that's going to be whenever the time comes that I branch out and start building an SPR platform, it's probably going to be a Mark 12, even though it's kind of old school,
but it's so beautiful.
It's just, oh man, it's just amazing. But anyways, so where I was going with that though is the car stock is a common theme in the old Clone Wars, and but yeah, they actually did have problems though with getting caught on kit and sliding it out of position. So just things like that the newer stocks are a lot better at not doing.
Also, something I didn't even think about when we were kind of trying to develop this topic, but as far as other considerations as well, is spray paint your rifle, man.
Yeah, do it.
You got to do it.
Don't be black rifling around. Their black rifles stick out like a sore thumb, especially under night vision. Holy crap. Under night vision, it's just like I think I've told this story before, but when we were overseas, we had ex-SAS, like British SAS guys, so British Special Forces. They were contractors, and they were on our COP, and their job was like going out and managing like border patrol and stuff like that, and training them, and having like, basically they were just civilian contractors that were there helping out and doing security, helping with like part of our security envelope. So like we had our actual, we obviously handled our own combat outpost security, but then the extended security beyond that, since we're close to the Pakistan border, was managed by Afghan Border Patrol, and they were helping with them. They actually they deploy with AKs because that's what they're using, and it makes sense. But it's, I think I've never done like overseas security civilian contracting, but I'm pretty sure that they have to kind of get their weapon when they get in country. So I think that's part of to do with it. That has something to do with it too. But they asked our leadership at the COP, they said, hey, do you think we can get, I know you guys have extra ARs or extra M4s in the armory. Like, can we get some signed out, since we, they were living in the COP with us. It's not like they're randos. Like, they're allies. They're ex-SAS, civilian contractors, allied nation contractors. And they're like, why? And our commander was like, why? And he said, well, because when these infantry, if we start getting overran and things get a little hairy and it gets close to the wire, these infantry kids are going to shoot anybody or he said, these infantry kids running around with PVS 14s are going to shoot anybody not holding a black rifle.
Yeah.
And our commander laughed and said, fair enough. And he issued them out M4s.
All that to say that's actually accurate. Like, if you've ever ran nods, you can see a black rifle. Like, you can identify it from distance.
Yep. And that's why, actually, when you go overseas, it's kind of like a tradition. A lot of guys will paint their rifles because it kind of hides the IR signature and stuff. But anyways, so that's important for IR signature. Also just visible, like daylight signature. But the other thing did you have anything to add on rifle painting?
I would just say just do it in a way that makes sense, like with your environment.
Yeah.
Because obviously it's not just nighttime protection as well as daytime protection, because a black rifle sticks out. I've seen plenty of pictures, of like black rifle versus painted rifle just laying up against a tree, like which one stands out. It's like, dude, obviously the black rifle is like does not belong at all.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that I'd throw in there is under other considerations, and this one's kind of a hard one to stomach because it is not cheap, but clip-on thermal devices.
Yep.
We're in a modern day and age where signature ID, whether it's through infrared or thermal, is a very real thing. And if you're fighting any kind of, or if you're, I don't even want to say fighting, if your enemy force that you're dealing with is any kind of advanced force by any means, not even like top tier, not even like, first world, but even some other like smaller kind of groups or contingencies or whatever, most likely going to be working against thermal imaging capabilities. It's just part of the technology now. And part of being able to hide from thermal is having thermal yourself. Understanding how to hide from it. You can do that.
I was about to say, the only way you're going to truly know how to hide from it is to go out and practice, and the only way you're going to be able to practice is if you have some sort of thermal imaging to actually try to hide against.
Yep. And also, it's like if you can see them, you got to assume they can see you, and if you can't even see them because you don't have thermal, then you have no idea if they can see you, and it's
a game changer for sure.
Yep.
I would say it's just like night vision. It's definitely a must.
Yeah. I think that's part of the modern day musket, man. Like being able to having all of your IR engagement covered, and then also jumping into the thermal spectrum and being able to do stuff there too. There's a lot of really good products available. They're expensive. I mean, you're going to spend anywhere between $5,000 and $10,000. But they're clip-on. One specifically I'm thinking of is made by iRay, I think, and it's really cool because it's got a mount. They thought about it. It's got a mount that mounts right up to the rail, right in front of your optic. You can use it to image through. You can also slide that thing off and use it for observation. Just like handheld style.
Yeah, it's a good option. One more consideration that I have before we move on, and it's something we're jumping all the way back up to the tip, but bipods, man.
Oh, yeah. I think this
is not a must, but I think it's definitely something that should be considered. Like if you're willing to lug around the extra weight of it, it's definitely beneficial.
They can help. It's a tool, treat it like a tool. It's not a must-have. You can set it up. They're pretty affordable. Like, honestly, I'm very partial to the old school Harris bipods. They're stout, they're tough, they're reliable. I've had mine for
they're
ever.
Heavy, but
they are a little bit heavy. Honestly, they're not too bad though. I mean,
they're not bad.
There's some light ones out there, but
you could take them off pretty easily too.
And that's what I was getting up to. Yeah, like you could do what Steven and I do, which is we have them mounted, but we just have swivel stud adapters on our AR rails, and you just unscrew the
retention.
The little retention knob, and then pinch the little clip device, and then your bipod's off. So it's something you can keep in your bag, throw it on if you need to. You can keep it on. I think thinking about it like that, like treating it more like an accessory, like something you can.
Yeah, depending on the mission, you can slap it on.
Yeah,
if you're planning on doing some door kicking, you probably don't need a bipod. You can lessen up your weight a little bit in the front.
And that's the same concept as like the thermal device. Like you don't need that. You're not going to want that mounted all the time,
Yeah.
But it's good to have. And then you can even treat your white light like that, like going back to white lights and people being concerned about, like if you have them on a QD and you can just pop them off real easy.
Or just unplug them.
Sweet. Yeah, exactly.
Like you said earlier, like just unplug it.
Yep.
But moving on, I think that gives people stuff to work with. If someone's trying not to build their own AR and they're trying to get something straight off the shelf, obviously you're still going to have to attach optics and lights, lasers, all that stuff. But for a good foundation build, it's going to come with good furniture, good internals, all that stuff, pretty much all the other stuff we covered. What do you think are some good options out there?
Well, you have your obvious ones like, a lot of people are going to be like Knight's Armament, as far as just being an all-around Chad of a gun. That's, that's a good way to go. But realistically, it's not an option. It's super expensive nowadays. You cannot find them. You have to like make some kind of witchcraft deal with someone in order to get one. So jumping right over from there, I'd say Bravo Company. Bravo Company is very good. They put a lot of thought into their platforms. They have really good support.
You're going to get all their furniture on that build. So there's that.
They're pretty available, but surprisingly, they're actually not, because they've become known as like the kind of like baseline duty gun, like solid all around duty gun, like price wise included.
Yeah, they're
not as available.
Everyday man.
Yeah,
the everyday man's gun.
But a gun that comes pretty capable, in my opinion, and I've actually been pretty impressed with it. Kind of a new kid on the block as far as the big picture goes, because they've only been making their full rifles now for a few years, is the Geisley Super Duties.
Yeah,
they're actually really available. They're out there, and I think they're available because most of the internet's like, why would you get a Geisley when you could spend $300, $400 less and get a Bravo Company? And it's like, yeah, that's valid, but Bravo Companies, you're playing the waiting game. You're trying to sneak around and find them or like piece them together because they're it's hard to get.
If you need it now, which if you don't have it, you do need it now.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not gonna say that. It seems like I don't know.
Yeah,
but you should be trying to work toward it.
Yeah.
I think, in my opinion. Yeah, it's a solid rifle that you can snag up right now fairly easily.
Yeah, and I'm actually really impressed with them. They have the really good rails on them. They come with obviously Geisley triggers, which are fantastic. They're built like tanks. Like a lot of people, I don't think realize how. Like they come with staked castle nuts and staked, like pin staked gas blocks. They're like head space them. They're all honed and all that stuff.
Yeah, and Geisley's machinists are so good that it's all done.
Yeah,
very well done.
They come with Surefire muzzle devices on them already. They're honestly really good, and you can get them for anywhere between like $1,700 and $2,100. So depending on kind of which one you go with, they also come pre-finished, like they do their, I can't remember the DVD or DVC coating or whatever.
It's not anodized.
No, it's like it is, but it's like it's whatever that process is called, because it's not black. I'm talking about their.
Yeah,
I cannot remember what they call it. Maybe we could look it up really quick. But
you can anodize in different colors.
Yeah, it is. It's a bonded finish. It's not like a spray. It's okay. It is chemically bonded. Here, let me look it up if you want to.
Yeah.
Talk about some.
No,
I
think they're solid. I don't know if there's very many other companies I would go with, other than those three. Like, there's companies like if you already have rifles that are going to be just fine, to fill in to those roles. But nowadays, like if you're buying a new rifle, like I remember old school Noveski were solid rifles, but they've obviously, I think they've kind of gone downhill. So there's like, there's rifles that they're still kind of rolling on their old name, I guess. and they may not be the best option anymore, kind of thing. But all that to say, yeah. Did you figure it out?
It is anodizing. Our distinctive anodized colors, such as DDC. DDC is the one I was thinking of. That's like that coyote color.
Oh, okay.
DRT, DAK, OD green.
So it's just different. You're just thinking of the different colors.
Yeah, yeah. So I was misunderstanding it, but yeah, no, it is anodizing, and they even say, they're like, just so you know, when you get it, it's gonna, like, anodizing has variation.
Yeah.
So it might be like a different variable of greens. Like one of our guys recently got one, and it was like, he's like, whoa, that's a brighter green than I thought it would be. I was like, yeah, it is, but it's because there's so many variations.
Yeah,
of, like,
once he set it up, though, it looked really good. I was dang, dude. But
yeah.
Yeah, so those are kind of some off-the-shelf rifles. If you were to be buying right now, those are the ones that I would suggest. But it's something that's super important, and we always go back to this pretty much in every podcast. But you got to go out there and you got to do the thing. Like, you got to go out there and you got to train with it. You got to work on it, because every rifle is going to kind of have its own, like, personality in a way.
Yep.
You got to go out there. You got to do dope cards. You got to go figure out what works, what doesn't work. Maybe you got to relocate switches or something. You're not going to know that until you actually physically go out there and you're running in full kit and you're doing it how you would be doing it if you were actually fighting.
Yeah.
As far as dope cards, obviously you need to have that before you're fighting. So that should be something that's a little bit more administrative and not just out there like pre-mission, like trying to figure out where your hits are landing and stuff.
And dope is data on previous engagement. That's an acronym, data on previous engagement, DOPE. And literally that is just taking the time to go out and catalog how your platform's performing with whatever ammunition you're running at the different ranges that you're shooting at.
With different ammunition.
A log on that. Yep.
Different like temperatures and
conditions.
Like seasons.
Yep.
Obviously that's going to change things, but I'm a little bit, I don't know. I don't nerd on that stuff that hard. Like I obviously think it's super important, but like it's hard to be like, man, I got to figure out what it is, because it's like
I kind of
10 degrees colder or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, man. Yeah, no, which is good. I think that's why everyone's got different passions. Like if you train with a group, everyone should have different passions and things, because you can kind of like hold each other accountable in different areas.
But it's cool because you can reference back on that. Like if you have an ammo type that you haven't used in a while, you can like flip back and be like, okay, when I was running that, okay, sweet. Okay, so I shot at like 4 different ranges. I shot at 100 yards, 225 yards, 450 yards, and then 50 yards, It's like, okay, how did I do? All right, cool. Because different ammunitions will perform differently than others.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's actually, some can be substantially different. So yeah, man, that all comes with training. Like, and on that, like taking time to get a good quality zero. So many people just do like,
that should be the
point
first
of
thing.
aim, point of impact stuff. Like
that's not just that's for your, if you run LPVO, that's for your LPVO. If you run a red dot on top, you need to make sure that thing's zeroed. Your IR laser, iron sights. Yeah, that's another thing for considerations. I always run iron sights. Like, I can't even flip up my rear sight because my LPVO is in the way, but I still have it on there. Like, yeah, it's just something that I'm always going to do. Yeah, but you can QD off your mount. If your optic's shot, you can QD off that mount, and you're good. You've got 3 redundancies, like, because you've got your I go 4 if I wanted to turn on my green light. No,
yeah, technically, yeah, I guess. But yeah, so you got to go out and train with this stuff. You got to zero it in. It does you no good if you don't have a zero. Understand it. Like, you need to, like, so many people are like, zero your rifle. No, you need to maybe even try different zeros. If you're not very, if you're experienced and you're like, yeah, I know that a 50 to 200 yard, 50 to 200 yard zero, or a 25 to 300, there's a bunch of different ones out there.
I can't remember who.
Straight up 100 yard zero.
Who was it that just did that post?
What are you talking about?
He was talking about different zeros.
Oh, I don't know.
From different ranges and showing like point of aim, point of impact at different ranges depending on where you zeroed out. It was actually a pretty good post, but there's people that got stuff out there, content on it and stuff, but
we will in the future. That's something I absolutely want to do.
It's it's definitely kind of a rabbit hole, but it's, I think, where you should start. Like, obviously you should have a good zero, otherwise your rifle's kind of pointless at that point. Like,
yeah, because you can't progress into all this other data on engagement information until you have a good zero.
If all your training is from 100 yards in, you're doing yourself a disservice, because your rifle, if you've got a rifle that we've got kind of gone over, your rifle is so much more capable than what you're putting it through.
Yep.
And why not have the full potential that you can possibly have out of that rifle?
Yeah. It'd be like buying a like M series BMW, like an M3 or something like that, or an M5, you know, like a sports series, high performance series BMW, and then just like
driving
it on back roads and going 25 miles an hour all the time, you know?
Yeah.
Never shifting out of like third gear, you know? It's like, no, you get that thing and you're like, all right, I want to get, like, I'll take this to a racetrack if I need to, you know? I want to see what this thing does all out, you know?
Yeah.
If you're buying something like that, then you want to be able to stretch the legs. And it's the same thing with a gun. Like, if you're setting it up in all these ways, anything you add to your gun, you need to be thoroughly familiar with it and have experience on it, you know? So like any change you make, re-zero. Start to run it through its paces. Do close range, like manipulation drills, you know, where you're just working the gun, like reloads, snap to target, you know, ready
room
ups,
clearings,
out of pocket shooting,
glass houses, things like that. Things that you know, it's easy to work on that stuff. You just got to get a little creative sometimes. And then obviously longer distance stuff. Yeah,
and that stuff too, like massively important. And you know, understanding your point of impact with a can on or without a can on, you know, all these things. Shooting at night, like being able to actually shoot with your IR device on, like these are,
you got to train all that.
Heavily important to do.
And it's a lot of time, and that's why
money too, ammo,
time, money. But yeah, it's important to do, and I think it's, if you're taking it seriously, you'll go out and do it. And I think having the gear kind of makes it more, already having the stuff to do it, I feel like makes it more like of an encouragement thing to actually, or like more motivational to go out and do it, because it's like, I have it, so let's do it.
We talk about it all the time. It's easy to buy the gear. That's the easiest part. Yeah, you got to save up for stuff, and yeah, it might be kind of hard to initially invest that money, but that is still the easiest part. The hard part is actually putting it to work. Getting out there. I'm not talking about going and shooting. That's fun. I'm talking about putting it to work, like strapping it on, going on rucks, taking it out, getting it wet, getting it muddy, getting it dirty, watching it get scratched up and beat up.
Yeah, because if it's going through that, then you're going through that as well. So build that bond with not only your guys but your rifle, and basically,
this is my rifle, this is my gun.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, there's a reason for all that. So all that oorah. I guess for conclusion,
wrapping this package up and sending it out.
Yeah, I think this was a good episode. I think this series is going to be an awesome series. Like, I'm looking forward to continuing on this, and these will come out. You know, it's not going to be like back-to-back series like we've done some of our series, but it'll be kind of thrown in throughout, and kind of more gear related, but still very much toward that, you know, modern Minuteman mission, getting people prepared and trying to help people think through certain processes, you know, just giving our 2 cents, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, and that's what it comes down to, is like, from that Minuteman perspective. I mean, we talked about it at the beginning, but thinking big picture, like being ready. All, like, you've done the legwork, you've done the training, you've got the gear. You know, the whole point of this is getting to the point where you know for a fact, me and my gear and my guys, you know, my community are ready at a moment's notice to deal with a wide envelope of issues and threats, you know, whether that's natural disaster, economic collapse, supply chain disruption, looting, rioting, civil unrest, straight up warfare like we see in Ukraine right now, civil war, tyranny, you know, all these things that are potential possibilities, and all of them are possibilities. I've heard a lot of people be like, you know, people that are preparing for doodly doodly doo. It's like, you do not know. We do not know what the future holds, and more importantly, that's why we focus, that's why we tend to like the Minuteman kind of perspective more than like we're a straight up militia. Not saying that militia is bad or anything, but militias tend to be a lot more militaristic in focus. I think that Minuteman kind of perspective and readiness and like doctrine and ideology is a lot more about I'm a regular guy living in my community. I'm enjoying my time with my family. I'm responsible for my own life in my own way. If you're someone like Stephen and I, you follow God and God's plan, and you're trying to just take care of yourself and also follow on by taking care of like your neighbor, your friends, your family, your community. And if something happens, I know that I'm that guy, and I'm saying I in general, like
all of us.
If you're this kind of, we're those types of people that God has blessed us with the willingness to stand in the void and protect people, protect those that are more vulnerable or those that don't have the skills or the tools necessary to
defend themselves.
To defend themselves. And this is kind of, this is big picture, like what we're about as a company, what we're about as what our podcast is about. And specifically, I think what your future gear purchases need to be about. And so I think that is kind of why let's start part 1, multi-purpose rifle, have one. Obviously it gets into the weeds a little bit when you start talking about, well, in my team, I'm the designated marksman. Okay. Well, I think if you're starting out though, and you're either new to it or you've been in it, you've been buying stuff, you've got a bunch of gear, but you're now starting to think in this vein, I think it's a great place to start.
Yeah, and honestly, like even that's where the military does such a good job. When you first get to your unit, you're just a rifleman. That's what you started out as. Everyone was a rifleman at some point or another.
Yep.
Whether that's what they still are, it doesn't matter. Everyone's a rifleman. And I think that's like the same concept you should have going into this is like you're a rifleman first, and then if you have specialty roles within your team, then that comes next. But everyone's a rifleman.
Yep. Sounds good. Return to rifleman, get out and train, work hard, put this stuff together, think long term, think big picture, and on top of all that, do this with a group of people if you can.